Chapter 9:47. This time, the people accompanying Song Qing-shu, other than the 3,000 elite soldiers, there were also Ouyang Feng and Xiu Qianren, the two great experts. Although Song Qing-shu had used all sorts of methods to pull the two of them onto his ship, but friendship still needed time to develop. This time, going to Chongyang Palace on official business was a good opportunity. To Ouyang Feng and Xiu Qianren, the two did not have a good impression of Chongyang Palace. In the past, Ouyang Feng was almost crippled by Wang Chongyang in Chongyang Palace. Thus, the two were very happy to accept this mission. Additionally, the eldest daughter of the Pucha clan, Pucha Qiucao, heard that Yang Guo had studied martial arts in Chongyang Palace. For some unknown reason, she insisted on following him to Mount Zhongnan. Pucha Ahu knew that his daughter was in a terrible mood because of Yang Guo's rejection of the marriage, so he hoped to use this opportunity to let her relax. Currently, the Pucha clan and Tranquil clan were in the honeymoon phase of cooperation. Song Qing-shu naturally did not want to reject the other party's face. In any case, with the 3,000 elite soldiers and experts like Ouyang Feng and Xiu Qianren, she would not encounter any danger. When Song Qing-shu left the capital, he also brought someone with him. Ever since the night of the coup d'etat, Zishan Dragon Queen Tajkis had fallen into his hands. He had not paid any attention to her and only locked her up in the palace. During this period of time, Tajkis was almost driven mad by this forgetfulness. However, as time passed, her initial apprehension had turned into numbness. Because Tang Quobian was still nominally gravely injured, Song Qing-shu openly hid in a luxurious horse carriage. Tajkis was also placed inside. Other than a few people who knew of her existence, the majority of the troops did not know of her existence. The cushion made from white fox fur was extremely soft and comfortable. The floor was covered with a layer of expensive carpet that was offered as tribute from the western regions. Almost no vibration could be felt from the carriage. As Song Qing-shu drank his chilled wine, he sighed in admiration at how comfortable the life of the ancient nobles was. What's more, sitting in front of him was a breathtaking beauty. Song Qing-shu did not expect that he would be able to indulge in the luxury of a carriage and a beauty after returning to ancient times. His mood immediately improved. He brought his cup to Tajkis and said, "Fine grape wine in a luminous cup. Drunk on the battlefield, Lord Grim. Since ancient times, how many people have returned from battle? It is a pity that the grape wine is bright red in color. Men of my generation will not have the spirit to drink it. Such an enchanting beauty is a perfect match for this wine. Would Madam like to have a taste?" Tadish snorted and coldly turned her head away. Song Qing-shu was not angry. Instead, he smiled and said, "Since Madam is not saying anything, I will take it that Madam has agreed." After saying that, he pinched her chin and poured the rest of the wine in the glass into her red lips without allowing her to say anything. Cough, cough. Soon after, Tadish choked. Scarlet red wine overflowed from the corner of her lips and slid down her jade-like chin. Slowly, it flowed along her delicate and slender neck to the faintly discernible ravine on her chest. Her snow-white skin and the scarlet red wine reflected off each other, unintentionally forming a scene of absolute beauty that was brimming with a peculiar allure. Song Qing-shu could not help but click his tongue in wonder. Madam's snow-white skin is truly unmatched by many women of the Central Plains. Seeing the other party glaring at him hatefully, Song Qing-shu slapped his forehead and said, "Look at my memory. I have forgotten to unseal Madam's acupoints." Following that, he stretched out his hand and brushed the air. Tadish immediately felt her entire body relax. The moment Tadish was freed, she prepared to pounce at him. However, when she recalled the comparison of their martial arts, she quickly calmed down. If they were to really fight, she would definitely not be his match. Moreover, with the narrow space of the carriage, if they were to engage in a fight, she would be the one to suffer in the end. Understanding the severity of the situation, Tadish could only sit back down with a straight face. Feeling her body becoming sticky, she hastily wiped the wine stains on her face and neck. When she was wiping her chest, her face suddenly turned red. Glancing at Song Qing-shu, she hastily turned her back. Song Qing-shu could not help but give a knowing smile. No wonder Tajkis was publicly acknowledged as the #1 beauty of the Wulin world, captivating the souls of countless heroes and warriors of the Brightness Peak. Now that she was wiping her body in anger, her every movement was so amorous. In the past, Song Qing-shu could not understand why the anime in his previous world loved to use the term feeding. But now he finally understood. Feeding a beautiful girl was indeed an indescribable feeling of joy. Where exactly do you intend to bring me? After wiping the wine stains clean, Tajkis asked with slight anger. I'll bring you for a stroll. We'll go sightseeing along the way. After that, we'll make a trip to Jianghuai. Song Qing-shu replied with a deadpan expression. Mount Zhongnan, Qiwanjin sect? Tajkis shook her head. She did not dare to be interested in this. I'm asking, how do you intend to deal with me? Deal with me? Song Qing-shu faintly smiled. How does Madam wish for me to deal with you? Hearing the frivolity in his tone, Tajkis cursed inwardly. She coldly replied, I wish for you to let me go. Is that possible? Of course it's possible to let you go. Song Qing-shu's reply was out of her expectations. Really? Even though she knew there was a trick, Tajkis still could not help but ask. Song Qing-shu continued, but even if I let you go, where can you go? You don't have to worry about that. I have my own place to go. Tajkis snorted. Is that so? Song Qing-shu disapprovingly smiled. He analyzed the situation for her. You came here on a mission from the Persian sect. Now that the mission has failed, Envoy Liu Yun and Envoy Miaofeng are dead. As for Envoy Hui Yue, she's currently locked up in the palace. I can sell her to a brothel with a single word. With such disastrous losses, even if your daughter is the sect master, she won't be able to protect you. Right? Tajkis's face paled. She knew that what he said wasn't without reason. The Persian sect had always been strict in its laws. Even if she returned to the Persian sect after suffering such disastrous losses, what awaited her would only be burning at the stake. Even though Xiao Zhao had become the sect master, she was still young. Moreover, she was forced to do something beyond her abilities. The authority of the sect was still in the hands of the 12 Precious Tree Kings and the Elders Guild. In order to control the sect master, how could those people let go of the opportunity to eliminate Xiao Zhao's helper? This is my own matter. You don't have to worry about it. Tajkis braced herself and said, All right then, let me talk about something related to me. Song Qing-shu took out a letter from his bosom and unfolded it in front of her. Madam, do you still remember what this is? Tajkis cast a puzzled glance at it. Soon, her face blushed. How could she not recognize it? Back when Chongqing Wang was sent to the imperial prison, she didn't hesitate to use her beauty to seduce the presiding judge, Tang Quobian, in order to save him. End of this chapter. Chapter 948. Initially, Tajkis's plan was to deny the debt. She thought that as the princess, with the backing of the Emperor Wanyanju, how could Tang Quobian, a mere prince consort, dare to come and collect the debt from her? Who would have thought that her plans could not keep up with the changes? Now that Wanyanrui was dead and she was no longer the high and mighty princess, the son-in-law whom she once looked down upon had now become the most powerful man in the Jin court. The originally worthless promissory note immediately became a hot potato. You did not rescue Wanyan Yuan. Why should I pay? Tadish quickly thought of an excuse. Song Qing-shu immediately laughed. Who said I did not rescue Wanyan Yuan? Everyone in the capital knows that I released him without charge and was even sent to prison by the emperor. However, Wanyan Yuan was unlucky and was eventually killed by the emperor. You can't blame me for this. Tadish anxiously said, This is clearly the same thing. Wanyan Yuan has never left the prison. I don't care about that. I have done what I promised. Next, it is time for you to fulfill your previous promise. Song Qing-shu put on a righteous expression. How can you be like this? Aren't you twisting words and forcing logic? Tadish angrily retorted. Song Qing-shu calmly looked at her. Madam has roamed the martial world for so many years. You should have long understood this principle. Regardless of whether it is purple road dragon queen or grandmother golden flower, when have they ever reasoned with those who died by their hands? The strong set the rules, while the weak can only obediently obey them. Tadish was startled and immediately fell silent. After a long while, she sighed. That's right, the weak are prey to the strong. This is the eternal and unchanging rule of the martial world. I was too slow. Song Qing-shu once again waved the promissory note in front of her. Does Madame now acknowledge your previous promise? Tadish expressionlessly snorted. Now that I am in your hands, what is the point of not acknowledging it? A satisfied smile appeared on Song Qing-shu's face. I quite admire Madame's current attitude. Tadish turned her head away, expressing her resistance by silence. Song Qing-shu didn't mind and continued. Madame, I know what you're thinking right now, but I have to remind you that your only way out now is to pledge loyalty to me. Is that so? The corners of Tadish's lips curled upwards, revealing the contempt in her heart. I know you don't think much of it, but it's because your rank is too low, resulting in a lack of intelligence. It's hard for you to understand your own situation. Song Qing-shu reached out and hooked her snow-white chin. Tadish subconsciously dodged away, but he didn't mind it as he continued. But in view of your devastatingly beautiful face, I'll patiently explain it to you. I'm all ears, said Tadish angrily, rolling her eyes at his earnest manner. Ever since she was a young girl, other than her husband, Han Qinya, whom she had fallen in love with at first sight, she had never treated any other man with the same gentleness. Even the radiant envoy of the right, Fan Yao, who had bewitched thousands of young girls. After her husband's death, she would rather disguise herself as an old and ugly golden flower granny than to reveal her peerless beauty in front of any man. This was enough to prove how much she valued this aspect. Song Qing-shu had molested her time and time again. If she wasn't worried that resistance would result in further molestation, she would have long erupted in revolt. However, such suppression had resulted in a bellyful of pent-up anger that could explode at any time. If I remember correctly, you were the saintess of the Ming dynasty, yet you secretly married Han Qinya. According to the church's regulations, you should have been executed by burning at the stake, right? Asked Song Qing-shu. That's all in the past. Presently, my position in the church is lofty. Who would dare to execute me by burning at the stake? Tadish calmly replied. However, her heart wasn't as calm as she appeared on the surface. This mission had failed, and she had suffered heavy casualties. After returning to Persia, it would be difficult for her to escape punishment. Even if Xiao Zhao were to borrow her position as the leader, she might not necessarily be able to protect her. Song Qing-shu seemed to have anticipated her reaction. He couldn't help but laugh. You relied on your daughter, Xiao Zhao, in the Ming dynasty in Persia, right? So what if I did? Tadish replied. But what if Xiao Zhao is also pursued by the Ming dynasty? When that time comes, no matter how big the world is, where would you guys find shelter? Song Qing-shu stared fixedly into her eyes. Tadish's heart skipped a beat. She hastily said, Nonsense. Xiao Zhao is currently the leader of the Persian main altar. Who in the Ming dynasty would dare to disrespect her? Song Qing-shu didn't directly answer her question. Instead, he changed the topic. If I remember correctly, Xiao Zhao should be deeply in love with the leader of the Middle-earth Ming dynasty, Zhang Wuji. That's right. Tadish nodded. This matter couldn't be considered secret. Whenever she thought of the gentle and refined Zhang Jiaozhu, she would have a favorable impression of him. It was a pity that her daughter wasn't fated to be with him. Then if Xiao Zhao had to choose between the Ming dynasty and Zhang Wuji, who do you think she would choose? Song Qing-shu directly asked. How could such a ridiculous situation happen? Tadish felt that it was a nonsensical question. She didn't even want to use her brain to think about it. What if it really happened? Impossible. Don't worry about whether it's possible or not. Just answer my question. It should be Zhang Wuji. Although Tadish had never been close to her daughter, as a mother, how could she not understand her daughter's thoughts? If not for saving her, how would Xiao Zhao be willing to leave Zhang Wuji's side? It seems that we share the same opinion on this point. Song Qing-shu smiled faintly. I also believe that Xiao Zhao would disregard everything for Zhang Wuji. So what if that's the case? Tadish asked doubtfully. Zhang Wuji is the leader of the Middle Earth Ming dynasty. Although the Middle Earth Ming dynasty and the Persian main altar didn't get along well, under the threat of the Mongolians, both sides have long since buried the hatchet. Why would Zhang Wuji go against the Ming dynasty? Song Qingshu smiled and continued asking, "You should know of your daughter's love rivals back then, right? Those who could be considered as love rivals are none other than Zhou Zhiruo and Zhao Min. As for Zhe, Tadish directly ignored her. From start to finish, Zhe could never be considered as a worthy opponent. Zhou Zhiruo later married you." Tadish suddenly recalled Song Qingshu's other identity, the son-in-law of the Amei faction. Only Zhao Min is left. That kid, Zhang Wuji, seems to like her a little more. But do you know that Zhao Min and him have already turned into enemies? Song Qingshu unhurriedly asked. Tadish was startled. Why? The year on Lingxi Island, she had personally witnessed the affectionate gaze between the two of them occasionally. It was definitely not fake. At that time, they were still stuck together like glue. How could they have turned into enemies in such a short period of time? Today, she had added 3 chapters in the group, which meant that she still owed 15 chapters. Chapter 949. Hearing Tadish question, Song Qing seemed to have sunk into his memories. After a long while, he sighed and said, "Because the current Zhang Wuji is no longer the same Zhang Wuji." What do you mean? Tadish was stunned. However, she quickly realized something and her pretty face changed. Are you saying that the current Zhang Wuji has been disguised by someone else? After witnessing Song Qing disguising himself as Tang Kuobian and Wanyan Xian, she subconsciously assumed that Zhang Wuji was also disguised by someone else. Song Qing shook his head and said, "No one has disguised themselves as him. Zhang Wuji's body has not changed." His body has not changed? Tadish felt that this sentence sounded strange. Did he have a change of heart? For all. Plus or minus? The more Tadish thought about it, the more she felt that it was possible. That last Zhao Min loved passionately and had an unyielding temperament. If Zhang Wuji had a change of heart, the two of them might really turn against each other. A change of heart? Song Qing nodded and said, "In a certain sense, it is a change of heart. Not only that, even his soul has changed." Tadish stared blankly at him, unable to comprehend what he meant by a soul change. She thought that he was referring to Zhang Wuji's personality having changed. The matter of revered Ming's possession was too unimaginable. Song Qing knew that she would find it hard to accept if he told her all of a sudden. Thus, he continued to guide her. "Back then, you sent Xiao Zhao to Brightness Summit in search of the heaven and earth great shift, right? Why do you know so much about us mother and daughter?" Tadish stared at him warily before nodding. "That's right. Back then, as a saintess, I was married to a man. The Persian main altar was infuriated. If I were to be caught, I would be burned to death. Thus, I sent Xiao Zhao to Brightness Summit in search of the main altar's lost heaven and earth great shift to redeem myself. Since you've been trying so hard to get the heaven and earth great shift, you must know its information like the back of your hand. What's the highest level of attainment in practicing the heaven and earth great shift among the previous sect masters of the Ming dynasty?" Song Qing asked. A trace of fascination appeared on Taj Tish's face. The heaven and earth great shift is the most profound and mysterious martial art of the Ming dynasty. Throughout the generations, only the leader was qualified to practice it. Just to practice the first level, those with a high level of comprehension would need 7 years, while those with a slightly lower level would need 14 years. The second level would also require at least 7 years. In the history of the Ming dynasty, there were even people who practiced for 21 years and still failed to master it. Just these 2 stages are already difficult for most people. The previous leader of the Ming dynasty, Yang Dingtian, was extremely talented. When mentioning Yang Dingtian, Tadish's face revealed a trace of reminiscence. Back at the Brightness Summit, she had been adopted by Yang Dingtian as his daughter. Yang Dingtian and his wife had treated her like their own daughter. But Zhang Wuji had cultivated it to the highest level, the seventh level, Song Qing said. I have also heard from Xiao Zhao that Zhang Wuji was able to cultivate the heaven and earth great shift to the highest level in just half a day. It is simply unimaginable. Tashtish still felt shocked when she recalled it. Perhaps it is because he possesses the 9-yang divine art. His internal energy is world-shaking. Tashtish suddenly thought of something and added, "That's not right. I heard from Xiao Zhao that Zhang Wuji had only cultivated it to the 6th level. The 7th level has 19 chance that he has never been able to comprehend." Song Qing coldly snorted. The Persian Ming dynasty and the Ming dynasty of the Middle Earth have been passed down for so many generations. There are so many outstanding leaders in history. Have you ever heard of anyone cultivating it to the 7th level? No. Tashtish shook her head with certainty. Otherwise, if Yang Dingtian had cultivated it to the 4th level and was about to break through to the 5th level, it wouldn't have left such a deep impression on her. Let alone the 7th level. There are only a few who have cultivated it to the 6th level. As far as I know, there is only one person, Zhang Wuji. No, there is another person, Song Qing added. The author of the Heaven and Earth Great Shift, revered Ming. Tashtish was stunned for a moment before agreeing. Although most of the disciples of the Ming dynasty treated revered Ming as a god, as a former saintess, she had seen ancient records that ordinary disciples couldn't. She knew that revered Ming's true identity was an outstanding and unrivaled expert who single-handedly founded the Ming dynasty. Later on, the Ming dynasty intentionally made him into a legend in order to increase the mysteriousness of their own sect. This was the image that most people knew of revered Ming. Song Qing then said, "In the history of the Ming dynasty, there wasn't even a single person who managed to cultivate the 6th level of the Heaven and Earth Great Shift. Naturally, he wouldn't know what the 7th level of the heart technique is." Zhang Wuji relied on the vigorous internal energy of the 9-yang divine art and coincidentally cultivated it to the 7th level. I don't know if he was lucky or unlucky. Why would he be unlucky? Tashtish was completely unable to understand. The Heaven and Earth Great Shift was a supreme martial art of the Ming dynasty. For Zhang Wuji to be able to cultivate it to a level that no one had ever achieved before or since, it was definitely a great fortune. Song Qing's voice turned cold. It's because the 7th level of the Heaven and Earth Great Shift isn't an internal energy heart technique. It's the art of body seizing. Body seizing? Different from the people of the Central Plains, Tashtish hailed from the western regions. She had once heard of a mysterious country that had disappeared in the long river of history. There was a sinister and bizarre black magic that could seize one's soul. However, this was too much of a nonsensical rumor. Most people merely treated it as a legend, and no one believed it. Correct. When Zhang Wuji cultivated it to the 7th level, he triggered the body seizing ritual. Another evil soul invaded his body. In the beginning, due to Zhang Wuji's profound internal energy, that soul could only carefully conceal itself. Later on, during the lion-slaying assembly, Zhang Wuji suffered from qi deviation during the battle with the Shaolin Temple's 3rd crossing. That evil soul took advantage of the situation and gained control over Zhang Wuji's body. Other than his closest women, Zhao Min and Zhou Zhuo, this was the first time Song Qing had told others about Zhang Wuji's body seizing. However, considering the potential value of Tashtish and Xiao Zhao, who is now the Persian main altar's cult master, this risk was worth taking. What you said is too absurd. How is that possible? Tashtish exclaimed in shock. Why is it impossible? Song Qing smiled faintly. Zhao Min and Zhou Zhuo are aware of this matter. You are acquainted with them as well. The next time you see them, you can ask them yourself. Recalling the recent feud between Zhao Min and Zhang Wuji, Tashtish's complexion turned slightly pale. Since you said that someone has taken over Zhang Wuji's body, who could it be? Actually, it isn't hard to guess. Since the 7th level of the Heaven and Earth Great Shift is the body seizing ritual, that person's identity should be obvious. Chapter 950. Looking at Tatish's horrified expression, Song Qingshu snapped his fingers beside her ear. If you were shocked enough, let's consider a more realistic question. What do you think Xiao Zhao will do after knowing the truth? Noticing Tadish's silence, Song Qingshu continued. Oh, I nearly forgot. According to your Ming dynasty's rules, saintesses and whatnot are meant to be consecrated to venerated Ming. Logically speaking, you and your daughter should be venerated Ming's women. Of course, your rights now belong to me. If venerated Ming wants you, he will have to ask for my permission. As he spoke, he proudly waved the contract Tadish had signed. Tadish directly ignored his words regarding her rights and seriously pondered over her daughter's reaction if what he said was true. Although Xiao Zhao was usually gentle and didn't seem to have any opinions of her own, that was under normal circumstances. If she were to know that something had happened to Zhang Wuji, she would definitely disregard everything. As a mother, how could she not sense her daughter's deep affection for Zhang Wuji? As for the reverence she should feel towards venerated Ming as a Ming dynasty disciple, Tadish sneered and directly ignored it. Seeing Tadish's expression, Song Qingshu smiled. It seems like we share the same opinion. Xiao Zhao will definitely seek venerated Ming for revenge. So who do you think the Persian Ming dynasty will support? Will it be the puppet maiden or the almighty venerated Ming? Of course it will be venerated Ming, Tadish coldly replied. If this was any other day, she wouldn't be sure of the precious Tree King and the Elder Council's choice. After all, a puppet maiden was much easier to control than venerated Ming. With Xiao Zhao as the cult maiden, they would have greater authority. But now, the Mongolian Empire was on the brink of destruction. To tide over this crisis, they had exhausted all sorts of methods and even allowed themselves to return to the Central Plains. If they knew that venerated Ming had revived, wouldn't they welcome this savior with fanfare? Song Qingshu smiled. Actually, you don't have to be so conflicted. Those from the Persian Empire have already made their decision. If nothing unexpected happens, Xiao Zhao should already be under house arrest. What? Tadish abruptly stood up. Although she was rather cold by nature, Xiao Zhao was now her only relative in this world. It's not strange that you don't know about it. Presumably, when venerated Ming's order reached the Persian headquarters, you were on your way to the Middle-earth. The sea is vast, so the headquarters wouldn't have specially sent someone to inform you, Song Qingshu replied. What exactly happened? Tadish hastily asked. Only then did Song Qingshu tell her about the last time he met venerated Ming at Blackwood Cliff and how they finally shook hands and made peace. At that time, venerated Ming mentioned that he had instructed the Persian main altar to contact the Western principalities and successfully ambush the Mongolian vanguard. The Mongolian general Cowardly Buhua died in battle, and 10,000 Mongolian elite cavalrymen were completely annihilated. At the same time, he sent assassins from Vulture's Nest to assassinate the Western punitive expedition commander Su Liawu. Even though they suffered heavy losses, Su Liawu was also gravely injured and on the verge of death. The Mongolian army, which was insufferably arrogant, suffered a major setback, and the pressure on the Persian Ming dynasty was greatly alleviated. Because these matters happened in the distant west, the countries of Central Plains did not care much about them. Tadish had no way of knowing either. You actually defeated venerated Ming. Tadish was extremely astonished. Even though she knew that Song Qingshu was highly skilled in martial arts, she never expected it to be to such an extent. One must know that in the eyes of the Ming dynasty's disciples, venerated Ming possessed great supernatural powers and was omnipotent. He was practically like a legendary god. How could such an existence be defeated by a mere mortal? To be precise, we fought twice, with one victory and one defeat. The first time, I nearly died in his hands, but was saved by a mystical young lady. Recalling the adorable Ah Qing, Song Qingshu couldn't help but smile knowingly. When he had the time, he would definitely pay a visit to Mount Kunlun to look for her. The second time we fought, venerated Ming was already injured and wasn't my match. However, considering our common enemy, the Mongolians, I spared him. Tadish felt as though she was on the verge of going insane. Today, she had been bombarded by various explosive news. First, It was Zhang Wuji who was possessed. Then it was venerated Ming's resurrection. Finally, it was Song Qing-shu who actually defeated venerated Ming. Although she normally didn't pay much attention to venerated Ming, that was only due to her lack of piety in her faith. It didn't hinder her acknowledgement of venerated Ming's strength. To think that such a demonic, godlike figure was actually defeated by Song Qing-shu and even had to submit to him in order to survive? Tadish's gaze towards Song Qing-shu instantly changed. Song Qing-shu couldn't help but burst into laughter. Why? Do you feel that my image has suddenly become much more glorious and majestic? Do you have an impulse to devote yourself to me? Go to hell. Tadish bellowed furiously with a blushing face. She wondered what was wrong with her earlier to actually change her opinion of this hoodlum-like existence. Song Qing-shu felt that she should have more or less digested everything by now. All right, you should understand your situation now. You failed your mission, and you will be burned at the stake. Furthermore, Xiao Zhao is going against revered Ming. In this big world, I'm the only one who can protect you and your mother. Tadish remained silent. She knew that Song Qing-shu's words weren't false. Even if she could avoid punishment after returning to the sect, Xiao Zhao would definitely break off relations with venerated Ming when she learns of the truth. Rather than being caught unprepared, it was better to prepare early. Venerated Ming's prowess had been deeply imprinted into the bones of every Ming dynasty disciple. And Song Qing-shu was the only one who had proven himself capable of defeating venerated Ming. Tadish pondered and felt that in this world, only Song Qing-shu could protect her from venerated Ming. Although Mongolia was powerful, they had been enemies for many years. She subconsciously eliminated that possibility. Liao was no longer what it used to be and was also dependent on Mongolia. The Qing dynasty was currently plagued with internal and external troubles. The Southern Song dynasty had been in a weakened state for a long time. As for small countries like Xixia, Dali, and Tufan, she didn't even need to think about it. You have racked your brains to rope me in. What is it for? Tadish was well aware that there was no such thing as a free lunch in this world. Song Qing-shu wouldn't take such a huge risk to help her for no reason. Madam is an outstanding beauty. Just your face alone is enough to make any man lose his rationality. Noticing Tadish's frown, Song Qing-shu hastily retracted his frivolous smile and solemnly said, Actually, what I value more is Madam's ability in disguise. While I am roaming the world, I also need someone to take charge in my stead. Madam is highly skilled in martial arts and farsighted. In addition to your ability in disguise, you and I are practically a match made in heaven. Although I am not from the Central Plains, I know that a match made in heaven shouldn't be used in such a manner. Tadish coldly replied. Song Qing-shu didn't mind. It seems like Madam has agreed to rely on me. Tadish hesitated for a moment before finally nodding her head. A radiant smile blossomed on Song Qing-shu's face. Then we can discuss about Madam's pledge of allegiance. According to the administrator's response, his QQ was frequently locked due to too many people adding him on QQ. Chapter 951. Pledge of Allegiance. Tadish was instantly stunned. What pledge of allegiance? Song Qing-shu looked at her evasive eyes and couldn't help but laugh. Madam is a smart person. Why do you want me to explain it so clearly? I can't possibly naively believe you just because of a word from Madam. Everyone, please search the book. Novel. The purple-robed dragon queen in the Heaven Sword and Dragon Saber was a fickle woman. Her love was only for her husband, Han Qinya. Apart from her, she was incomparably fickle towards everyone else. The butterfly bone fairy doctor, Hu Qingyo, had saved her before and killed her without batting an eye. From Yang Dingtian to the disciples of Brightness Peak, everyone treated her extremely well. But in the end, she betrayed all of them for a man she had only met once. What was even more speechless was that the man was an enemy of the Ming dynasty. Back then, when the Ming dynasty broke off relations with her, only Golden Mane Lion King Xie Sun attended her wedding. Her and her husband's nicknames, Golden Flower Granny and Mr. Silver Leaf, were named after the wedding gift that Xie Sun gave her. In the end, she schemed against Xie Sun's dragon saber, causing Sun to remain indifferent even when he was in danger. Even towards her biological daughter, Xiao Zhao, she didn't display any maternal love. Xiao Zhao was still so young, but Tadish forced her to disguise herself as an ugly person and sneak on a brightness peak to steal the heaven and earth great shift. To people who weren't from the Ming dynasty, Brightness Peak was no different from a dragon's pool or a tiger's den. If Xiao Zhao wasn't careful, she would be consigned to eternal damnation. As a mother, Tadish was truly ruthless. Of course, if she was the female protagonist in the book, these problems wouldn't be a problem because many female protagonists had such a temperament. They only had their men in their eyes and didn't care about anything else. Zhao Min, Huang Rong, and the other women had similar temperaments. It was just that their men were the protagonists of the novel. Therefore, their actions were pleasing to the readers. But Tadish's husband, Han Xinya, was just a bystander. From a bystander's point of view, the readers would naturally feel that she was vicious and cold. Song Qingshu wasn't sure if he was the protagonist of this chaotic world. Furthermore, it was obvious that Tadish hadn't fallen in love with him. How could he trust her so easily? Tadish quickly regained her composure. What do I have to do to convince you? Song Qingshu refilled a glass of wine and leisurely drank it while leaning against the chair. This is something that Madam should consider. Tadish's complexion fluctuated incessantly before revealing a hint of bewilderment. Finally, she asked with uncertainty, "Otherwise, I can pledge my allegiance to you." Song Qingshu shook his finger and said, "The most unreliable thing in this world is an oath." Revered Ming was the true god of all the disciples of the Ming dynasty. Every disciple who joined the sect would swear allegiance to him. But what happened in the end? Then what do you suggest we do? Tadish seemed to have guessed something, and her tone became less courteous. Song Qingshu reached out his hand and embraced Tadish's soft waist, pulling her into his embrace. Pinching her chin, he spoke condescendingly. "Since you're willing to pledge your allegiance to me, offer your everything to me unreservedly." Ever since Han Qinya passed away, Tadish had never been so intimate with a man. Feeling both embarrassed and furious, she subconsciously wanted to retaliate. However, unbeknownst to her, what Song Qingshu had done, she felt that she couldn't summon even the slightest bit of Jinqi. She struggled a few times, but other than rubbing her delicate body against the man's embrace, there was no effect at all. When Tadish realized that her struggles were only benefiting Song Qingshu, she immediately halted her movements and glared at him with a fiendish expression. "Hurry and let go." Song Qingshu remained unmoved. His lips curled into a faintly discernible smile. "If you and I were in your shoes, would you let go under such circumstances?" Tadish was momentarily at a loss for words. If she were a man, she wouldn't be willing to let go of such an enchanting beauty. She had always been extremely confident in her looks. While she was lost in thought, Song Qingshu wasn't going to be courteous with her. His pair of large hands slipped into her clothes. Tadish's body stiffened. She didn't expect him to act so unconventionally. All the men she had met before, without exception, would try their best to curry favor with her, fearing that she would frown. In the end, Song Qingshu wasn't the least bit gentlemanly. His actions were no different from a hoodlum. Most importantly, she was well versed in dealing with a gentleman. For so many years, she had been surrounded by all kinds of pursuers, yet none of them had even touched her hand. In the end, ever since she met Song Qingshu, she had suffered all sorts of setbacks. First, in order to hide from the great Qing kingdom's investigation, she had to strip off her clothes in front of Song Qingshu, exposing her body to a man other than her husband. Back then, she was simply inconsolable from the shame. But now, not only did he directly touch her, she didn't know what sorcery he had used. Tadish was initially inconsolable from the shame, but soon a peculiar sensation surged through her body, giving her the impulse to let him do whatever he wanted. Fortunately, she was a very opinionated person. She quickly recovered and said, "If you continue to disrespect me, I will shout." Currently, they were in the carriage. Even though Song Qingshu had instructed the soldiers to stay away from the carriage, If she were to make a ruckus, the people outside would still be able to hear the commotion. Shout as you wish. The people outside are my subordinates. Do you think they will help you or me? Song Qing-shu was instantly amused. Tadish bit her lips and glared at him hatefully. As the emperor's son-in-law, you have to be mindful of your image. If this matter were to be reported back to the imperial court, you would have to bear the consequences. Song Qing-shu was amused. Have you forgotten that I am the current emperor of the Jin kingdom? You. Tadish was momentarily at a loss for words. Only now did she realize that she was completely powerless before him. Dong, dong, dong. At this moment, a series of knocks came from the door. Tadish immediately felt relieved, as though she had seen her savior. Come in. Song Qing-shu didn't stop his actions and calmly said. Tadish's body stiffened upon hearing his words. This person actually doesn't have any intention of avoiding me? How could she allow herself to be exposed in her current state? Unfortunately, things didn't go according to her will. The door quickly opened, and she could only helplessly bury her face in Song Qing-shu's embrace, hoping that no one would recognize her. Song Qing-shu couldn't help but laugh. Tadish was usually quite intelligent, but she actually had the mentality of an ostrich at crucial moments. When Pu Qian-xiao entered the room and saw the situation, she couldn't help but reveal a look of disdain. She had also heard that Tang Quobian had brought a mysterious woman along with him. At that time, she thought that Tang Quobian was too daring. He had a princess wife at home, yet he brazenly cheated on her. Yet now, she personally witnessed that he didn't have any misgivings in front of her. He wasn't just daring, he was simply lawless. Marshal, it's getting late. Should we order to set up camp? Pu Tian-xiao coldly inquired. Of course. Everyone should be tired after a long day of traveling. Let's stop here. Song Qing-shu answered. Pu Tian-xiao nodded and withdrew expressionlessly. It wasn't that Song Qing-shu didn't notice the look of disdain on her face. However, he didn't have any feelings for this young lady and naturally didn't care about her thoughts. Honestly speaking, though Pu Tian-xiao's chest and buttocks were rather flat, she was still a beautiful young lady. However, Song Qing-shu was surrounded by beauties that could cause the downfall of nations and people. Pu Tian-xiao's beauty wasn't enough to attract his attention. Furthermore, she was engaged to Yanghua. Yanghua was already suffering enough. Song Qing-shu felt that there was no need to add insult to injury. In the end, Song Qing-shu released Tadish. After all, he was currently the marshal of an army. He had to appear before his subordinates to do some work. Brother Song, if this old man was 30 years younger, I'm afraid I would also be envious of your heaven-defying luck with women. Ouyang Feng watched as Song Qing-shu carried the blushing Tadish back to the tent. He couldn't help but sigh. He was one of the few who knew of Tadish's identity. One must know that Purple Dragon Queen's beauty had spread throughout the pugilistic world in the past. Brother Feng must be joking. Who in the pugilistic world doesn't know that Western poison isn't fond of women? Song Qing-shu replied with a smile. Although this old man isn't fond of women, I'm still a man. Ouyang Feng was incomparably gloomy. Every time I see you, there's a different woman by your side. Most importantly, every one of them is a seductress that can cause the downfall of nations and people. I truly don't know how you manage to deceive them. I'm a decent person. How can a decent person's matters be considered deceiving? Song Qing-shu chuckled. Ouyang Feng also smiled knowingly. If Ke-er was still alive, the two of you would get along very well. His tone was filled with sorrow. The dead have passed. I hope Brother Feng can restrain your grief. Who knew that Song Qing-shu would suddenly change the topic? However, let me say something that deserves a beating. If Ouyang Ku was still alive, we'd be thanking the heavens and earth if we didn't fight over women. How could we have become friends? Ouyang Feng recalled the scene of the two of them fighting over women and couldn't help but smile. That's true, but Ke-er can't beat you. He'd most likely be toyed to death by you. Ouyang Feng had stayed in the Hailing Palace for a long time and knew that Wanyan Liang's intelligence and ability were top-notch. But in the end, he'd still been toyed around by Song Qing-shu. Seeing Wanyan Liang at his peak being beaten to the point of no return by Song Qing-shu, Ouyang Feng couldn't help but sigh. Song Qingshu hastily revealed a frightened expression. Brother Feng, we've known each other for so long. You should know that I've never been interested in men. Ouyang Feng froze. Only now did he realize that the word toyed to death had a different meaning. His expression immediately became strange. He laughed and scolded. You're the only person in the world who dares to joke with me like this. Song Qingshu smiled. Because we're friends. Yes, we're friends. Ouyang Feng sighed. Now that he was old, he had a different understanding of this phrase that he'd scoffed at in the past. Noticing that Song Qingshu was looking at the tent from time to time, Ouyang Feng immediately laughed. All right, every moment is worth 1,000 gold. Brother won't be so blind. I'm going to find Old Man Xiao for a drink. With that, he swaggered off. Book for B22222103N. Chapter 952. Looking at Ouyang Feng's laughing and heroic back, Song Qingshu couldn't help but smile. Everyone says that the Western poison is sinister and vicious, but in my opinion, this old man is actually quite adorable. It seems that everyone has a different side to them. Only after ordering the guards at the entrance of the tent to move further away did Song Qingshu enter in high spirits. Hearing his movement, Tajtish, who was sitting on the bed, raised her head to look at him for a moment before lowering her eyelids again. Seeing her expression, Song Qingshu couldn't help but be taken aback. You seem to have resigned yourself to your fate. Tajtish's expression finally changed a little as she coldly replied, You just want to prove your loyalty. But have you ever considered that by using such methods, even if you obtain me, you should be thanking the heavens that I don't hate you to the bone? How can I be loyal and devoted to you? Song Qingshu nodded his head in satisfaction. Walking to her side, he casually unsealed her acupoints. With his level of martial arts, unsealing Tajtish's acupoints wouldn't affect him at all. I'm very gratified. After so long, Madam has finally found a decent reason. Having regained her mobility, Tajtish subconsciously moved a few feet to the side, as if this was the only way to give her a sense of security. Noticing her small movements, Song Qingshu couldn't help but smile. Madam, why don't you listen to a story? These years, the Ming dynasty of Persia has always been at war with the Mongols. You should be familiar with the deeds of the Mongol Khan Temujin, right? That devil? What are you talking about? Before meeting Song Qingshu in Tajtish's heart, the Wisdom King was a godlike figure, while Temujin was a demon-like figure. But now, Song Qingshu could be mentioned in the same breath as those two. It's about his harem. Song Qingshu replied, This devil loves to steal other people's wives and daughters. After he dies, he will definitely enter the kingdom of darkness and suffer the pain of being burned by fire. The kingdom of darkness was a concept in the doctrine of the Ming dynasty. It was similar to hell. Song Qingshu disapproved of Tajtish's curse. Unfortunately, Temujin believes in the everlasting heaven. With the everlasting heaven protecting him, the gods of your Ming dynasty cannot do anything to him. Seeing that Tajtish was about to open her mouth to argue, Song Qingshu raised his hand and interrupted her. I'm not here to discuss religious doctrine with you today. The story I want to tell you is related to Temujin's Empress Yesue. Do you know her? Tajtish was at a loss. I only know of his first empress, Borte. Temujin had too many women in his life. Moreover, this was not the era of the internet in Song Qingshu's previous world. The flow of information was too slow, so it was not surprising that she did not know of him. Song Qingshu explained, Empress Yesue is Temujin's third empress. Apart from the first empress, Borte, she is the most favored and trusted woman of Temujin. However, did you know that Empress Yesue's original husband was not Temujin? Tajtish frowned and said unhappily, Temujin is a beast. He has stolen other people's wives many times. That's right, Yesue was indeed stolen by Temujin. Yesue's father was a Tatar, a feud with the Mongols. After Temujin defeated her father, he sent troops to search for her father's whereabouts. In the end, he found her younger sister, Yesue. Seeing that Yesue was young and beautiful, he took her into his harem. After that, Yesue tried her best to recommend her older sister, Yesue, who was 10 times more beautiful than her. Temujin was moved and sent people to look for her. At this time, Yesue and her husband led the defeated Tatar people to hide in the forest. In the end, Temujin was able to capture her and took her as his concubine. He doted on her very much. However, Yesue loved her husband deeply. She was always in a daze, missing her husband who was separated from her in the chaos of war. Hearing this, Tajtish couldn't help but praise. What an amazing woman. Trapped in the enemy's camp, she still kept her vows with her husband and was not moved by wealth and glory. What happened after that? Did she reunite with her husband? She was deeply in love with her husband, Han Qinya, so she subconsciously put herself in Yesue's shoes and began to worry for the poor couple. They reunited, but in an unexpected way. Song Qingshu sighed and continued. One day, Temujin was hosting a banquet in the wilderness. While everyone was drinking to their heart's content, he noticed that Yesue kept sighing at a certain spot in the crowd. Temujin became suspicious. Temujin immediately ordered Macaulay to order all the spectators to return to the headquarters and raise their flags. In an instant, the surroundings became silent and solemn. All that was left was a beautiful young man with shining eyes who had no place to return to. "Is that Yesue's husband?" Tajtish exclaimed. Even though it had nothing to do with her, she felt as if she was personally involved and worried for the man's fate. Song Qingshu nodded and continued his explanation. "Who are you?" Temujin asked. "Why are you disobeying my orders and not returning to your tribe?" The young man glared at Temujin and replied in a loud voice, "I am not someone else, but Yesue's husband. As a minister, you have no sense of honor. Not only did you destroy our tribe, but you also stole my beloved wife. Today, I have been captured by you. You can kill me or torture me as you wish." "What a brave man!" Tajtish exclaimed. The scene of Han Qinya going to the summit of light all by himself appeared in her mind. At that time, in front of all the heroes of the Ming dynasty, he also had the same unflinching expression in the face of death. And then? Tajtish hurriedly asked. Even though she had vaguely guessed the ending, she still held on to a glimmer of hope that Temujin would appreciate the true feelings between her and her husband and simply let them be. Unfortunately, Song Qingshu's words quickly shattered her unrealistic fantasy. "You, the descendant of the Tatar people, should have been killed in the first place. Today, you even dared to peep into the palace. You deserve 10,000 deaths." Not long after, the young man's head was brought to the table by one of his subordinates. "What?" Tajtish covered her mouth with her hand. Her entire body was stiff, and tears unknowingly flowed down her cheeks. Actually, she was not such a sentimental woman, but this couple reminded her of herself and Han Qinya, especially the husband, who had the exact same temperament as Han Qinya. Hearing that Temujin unhesitatingly cut off the man's head, she subconsciously recalled the scene of Han Qinya's death. Her nose twitched and tears began to fall. Just like that, Song Qingshu silently wept as he watched her. His impression of Tadish was still the ruthlessness and coldness of Zishan Dragon Queen and Granny Goldenflower in the original novel. Now that he saw her other side, her delicate appearance, he couldn't help but feel a trace of tenderness. Tajtish quickly noticed the look in his eyes and couldn't help but blush. She hurriedly wiped away the tears on her cheeks and continued to ask, "What happened next?" Song Qingshu's face revealed a playful smile. Her ending was much better than that of her poor husband. Under the mediation of her sister, Temujin did not blame her. Later on, she seemed to have thought things through and changed her indifferent attitude. Together with her sister, they did their best to please Temujin and became his most beloved woman. She was ranked third, and Duo was first. Duo was a Mongolian translation. It meant a palace with an army, households, and counties, forming an independent military and economic unit. It could be understood as the 3 palaces and 6 courtyards. Although there were many imperial concubines in ancient times, Not every imperial concubine had their own palace. Only a few of the most noble concubines had their own palace, while the rest were under the names of different concubines. For example, in the Jin kingdom, other than the empress, only concubine Yuan, concubine Zhao, and concubine Li had their own palace. The rest of the concubines were under the names of these 4 concubines. In Mongolia, the status of these concubines was equivalent to that of the Jin imperial concubines. How could this be? Tish was extremely shocked. In her mind, Yu Sui would either commit suicide on the spot or be executed by Temujin. How could she throw herself into the arms of another man right after her husband's death? And that man was her husband's murderer. It must be hard to understand, but this is the reality. Song Qingshu said calmly, I don't doubt Yu Sui's feelings for her husband, but her husband is already dead. No matter how deep her feelings are, they will not be able to withstand the wear and tear of time. Moreover, Temujin is superior in every aspect compared to her husband. Moreover, Temujin also dotes on her. A man who is superior in every aspect, stands at the top of the world, and loves her at the same time, how many women in this world would not be moved? I wouldn't, Tish said angrily. Song Qingshu looked at her calmly. The reason why I told you this story is to tell you to look forward and not to wallow in the sorrow of the past. Even the man who killed Yu Sui's husband was able to be together with her in the end. Why can't we be together? At least we don't have any deep hatred between us. Tish snorted and turned her head away, not saying anything. Song Qingshu continued. Do you know what the most important reason for Yu Sui to fall in love with Temujin was? What is it? Tish had never been able to figure it out. Song Qingshu smiled. It was Temujin who slept with her on the first night he caught her. Tish had been listening attentively to his wise words, but when she heard this, her face immediately turned red with anger. Do you think I'm joking? Song Qingshu's expression turned serious. Because after that night, Temujin placed himself on the same starting line as Yu Sui's husband. They were both Yu Sui's men. If not for that night, no matter how well Temujin treated her, in Yu Sui's heart, he would never be on par with her husband. But after that night, everything changed. No matter how hard Temujin tried to treat her, perhaps she didn't realize it, but deep in her heart, she began to slowly accept Temujin. Thus, even when Temujin killed her husband, despite her grief, she did not overreact. Because deep in her heart, she had already recognized Temujin as her man. You are twisting words and forcing logic, Tish said angrily. Song Qingshu smiled faintly. After saying so much, I only want to tell you one thing. If I want to obtain your heart, I must first obtain your body. Chapter 953. Under Tadish's furious gaze, Song Qingshu spoke with fervor and assurance. Perhaps you will hate me in the beginning. However, as time passes, I believe you will eventually accept me. You must be dreaming, Tadish retorted furiously. I believe in my own charisma. Song Qingshu replied with a deadpan expression. Someone as young and handsome as me, with 100,000 elite troops under my command, controlling several kingdoms, one of the best in martial arts, gentle and considerate towards women. Where else in the world can one find such a man? TSK. Even I am moved by your words. Tadish was so angry that she laughed instead. I have never seen such a shameless man like you. Since that is the case, you should marry yourself. Song Qing sighed. It's a pity that I'm not a woman. Otherwise, I would really marry him. Tadish was rendered speechless by his expression. For a moment, she was at a loss for words. Why must Madam resist me? Your husband has been dead for over a decade. You are now in the prime of your youth. Don't tell me you wish to spend the rest of your life in solitude. Song Qingshu gazed calmly into her eyes. Tadish's mind shuddered. That's right. Don't tell me I really wish to spend the rest of my life in solitude. All these years, she had awoken countless times in the middle of the night. In the dead of night, she gazed at the ice-cold bed and the tranquil moon outside the window. Her heart gradually turned colder than ice. Back then, she was also a young lady brimming with the spring of youth. Every day, she lived a carefree life. Every morning, she would wake up with a faint smile hanging on the corner of her lips. Who knows how many youths were charmed by her. Later on, she met Han Qinya. Those days were indeed joyous. However, not long after, Han Qinya passed away. She was no longer the cheerful young lady of the past. Instead, she was the vicious and perverse golden flower granny in the eyes of the pugilistic world. Tadish suddenly snapped out of her trance. What's wrong with me? How could I be distracted by a few words from him? Thinking of this, her expression turned stiff. What does it have to do with you whether I live alone for the rest of my life? Of course it's related. Song Qingshu smiled faintly. I said so much because I want you to know that no matter what, I will have your body today. You can fight back with your heart full of resentment, or you can learn from Isue and close your eyes to enjoy it. Anyway, there's a high probability that you will accept me in the end. Why not bring the time forward so that you can avoid a long period of pain and resentment? Are you certain that I will accept you in the end? Tadish sneered. Song Qingshu smiled and said, How do you know if you don't try? Then he stretched out his hand. Tashtish's expression changed. She hastily executed her qigong and dashed out. Her qigong was already excellent to begin with. In addition to the fact that she was in a hurry, she had exceeded her usual standard. In a blink of an eye, she arrived at the entrance of the tent. However, before she could rejoice, her head slammed into a sturdy chest. As it turned out, Song Qingshu was already waiting for her at the entrance. Due to the forceful impact, Tashtish felt a little dizzy from the collision. Her entire body involuntarily fell backwards. Just as she was about to land on the ground, Song Qingshu extended his arm and grabbed her waist, lifting her up. Let go. Tashtish finally regained her senses and glared at him with a blushing face. Their current posture was extremely ambiguous. Their abdomens were tightly pressed together, while Song Qingshu's hand was placed on her soft waist. Even though they were separated by a layer of clothing, she could still feel the heat emitted from his body. How could she, who had always maintained her purity, endure such a situation? Are you certain? Song Qingshu's smile was rather playful. Hurry and let go. Tadish emphasized once more. All right then. Song Qingshu retracted his hand after speaking. Immediately after, he heard a shriek. As it turned out, Tashtish's entire upper body was suspended in the air. If not for Song Qingshu's hand supporting her, she would have fallen to the ground long ago. Now that Song Qingshu had released his hand, she naturally lost her balance. Nevertheless, she ultimately didn't fall to the ground. Her human instincts prompted her to frantically grab at her surroundings in an attempt to maintain her balance. Finally, amidst her panic, she grabbed onto a warm and forceful large hand. That pair of large hands were extremely steady, and very soon, they stopped her from falling. Only then did Tashtish realize that she was grabbing onto Song Qingshu's hand. Her face flushed red in an instant. Due to the previous fright, her heartbeat sped up. For a moment, she felt as though she had returned to the time when she first met Han Qinya. At this moment, when she looked at Song Qingshu's smile, it didn't seem as hateful as before. Song Qingshu sighed inwardly. The flirting skills summarized by countless veterans in his previous world were indeed awesome. Even a woman like Purple Robe Dragon King, who had countless suitors by her side, was rendered dizzy. The feeling of standing on the shoulders of a giant was truly wonderful. Naturally, he wouldn't let go of such a good opportunity. Extending his hand, he pulled Tashtish up and slowly inched his head towards her rosy lips. Tashtish's eyelashes trembled. For some unknown reason, it was as though her brain had short-circuited. She didn't have the slightest bit of thoughts of rejection as the two lips inched closer. In the end, she gradually closed her eyes. However, just as she was about to close her eyes, she suddenly saw a black shadow pouncing towards Song Qingshu's back. She immediately snapped back to reality. In that instant, she didn't have any other thoughts and subconsciously pushed Song Qingshu away. Careful! Actually, Song Qingshu had long sensed that there was someone behind him. However, he didn't expect Tashtish to save him. For a moment, he was stunned on the spot, unable to react. Didn't she wish for nothing more than my death? Seeing that her sure-kill attack had failed, the black shadow glared at Taj-Tish furiously. Soon after, she was awed by her peerless beauty and couldn't help but stare blankly. Taj-Tish originally possessed a face that could cause the downfall of nations and people, especially now that her face was flushed with peach blossoms and her eyes were filled with affection. Her charm was displayed to the extreme. Song Qing-shu observed from the side. That black shadow was clad entirely in black clothes. However, with her tall and slender figure and curvaceous curves, it was easy to determine her gender. Especially the spear in her hand, it seemed rather familiar. Pear Blossom Spear? Song Qing-shu was startled. The black shadow was a woman after all. After the initial shock, she quickly recovered and recalled her mission. She hastily raised her spear and stabbed towards Song Qing-shu. Unexpectedly, when she raised her head and saw his appearance, she couldn't help but cry out in alarm. "Why are you here? Long time no see, Fourth Lady." Song Qing-shu couldn't help but smile wryly. Because he was teasing Tadish in the tent, he naturally wouldn't be so perverted as to use Tang Quobian's mask. Instead, he revealed his own appearance. If he were to encounter any other assassin, he could just casually silence them. However, the other party was Yang Miaozhen, who had a deep relationship with him. Chapter 9:54. Hearing footsteps from afar, Yang Miaozhen knew that staying here would be dangerous. Although she was familiar with Song Qing-shu, she couldn't figure out the current situation. Her years of cautiousness prevented her from placing herself in danger. Gazing deeply at Song Qing-shu, she made a prompt decision to run outside. "Where do you think you're going?" Qiu Qianren's furious roar could be heard from outside, followed by the clashing of weapons. Not long after, the sounds of battle grew further and further away. Reporting to Lord Marshal, the assassin's martial arts are very high. He managed to break through the encirclement before we could surround him. Mr. Qiu is currently pursuing him. A personal guard reported from outside. Song Qing-shu plainly replied, "Inform Mr. Ouyang to bring Mr. Qiu back. There's no need to worry about that assassin." Yes, although the personal guard was puzzled, a military order must be obeyed. He didn't dare to ask anything and hastily retreated. Song Qing-shu pondered in his heart. With Yang Miaozhen's martial arts, she naturally wouldn't fear Qiu Qianren. However, if the two of them were to fight, he wouldn't want to see any mishaps on either side. Moreover, if he were to capture Yang Miaozhen, dealing with her would be a huge headache. Thus, he might as well let her go. She had only bumped into him once and lacked sufficient information. Even if she had suspicions, she wouldn't be able to determine his relationship with Tang Quobian. After settling the crisis regarding the assassin, Song Qing-shu turned around and gazed at the absent-minded Tadish. He curiously asked, "Why did you save me earlier?" Tadish blankly shook her head and mumbled, "I don't know either. I just subconsciously pushed you away. It seems that deep in Madam's heart, you still can't bear to see me get hurt." Seeing Tadish's brows creasing, Song Qing-shu hastily changed the topic. "Tell me about your husband." Hearing him mention her husband, Tadish's eyes gradually revealed a trace of tenderness. "Qinya, he is the best man in the world." Song Qing-shu wasn't overly hasty. Instead, he pulled out a chair and gestured for her to take a seat. He didn't lean over like before, but instead sat far away from her. Pouring a glass of wine, he handed it to her. Amen, to be able to make a peerless beauty like Madame fall head over heels in love. Mr. Silverleaf is definitely a very good man. Seeing that he agreed with her point of view, Tadish's expression turned even more relaxed, and she didn't reject the wine offered by the other party. As soon as the wine cup entered her hand, she was startled by the cold air it emanated. She thought to herself, this wine was clearly at room temperature when it was poured out. Yet in such a short period of time, he was able to use his jinqi to freeze it to a bone-chilling cold. His ability to control his internal energy is truly uncanny. I wonder how he managed to cultivate his astonishing internal energy at such a young age. Gazing at Song Qing-shu's handsome and determined face, curiosity was piqued for the first time in her life. There's no need for you to deliberately speak against your heart. Chinya's martial arts are far inferior to yours, and her authority and status are far inferior. Even her most outstanding appearance. Tashtish paused and deliberately glanced at Song Qing-shu. She may not necessarily be superior to you. Song Qing-shu shook his head and sternly replied, "These are the standards of others. But I know that even if Mr. Silverleaf is an ugly freak without the strength to truss a chicken, he is still the number one man in Madam's heart." Hey, Tadish spat, her cheeks flushed red. "I'm not blind. If he was an ugly freak, I wouldn't have foolishly followed him out of Brightness Summit." As she spoke, there was a faint smile in her eyes, as if she was recalling those sweet days back then. Seeing a smile once again appear on her face, Song Qing-shu couldn't help but praise. Madam should smile more often to not waste such a heavenly beauty. "Do you know how beautiful you look when you smile?" Tadish's expression immediately turned stiff. All these years, she had heard countless praises of her beauty. Not only did she not feel a shred of joy, she even loathed it. That was because in her heart, her beauty was only appreciated by her husband alone. But strangely, upon hearing Song Qing-shu's direct praise of her today, perhaps due to the sincerity in his tone, she unexpectedly didn't feel the slightest bit of anger. The only reason why she kept a straight face was because of habit. Song Qing-shu suddenly sighed. "It's a pity that I didn't have the fortune to meet Mr. Silverleaf. I'd really like to see what kind of person could capture Madam's heart." Tadish hesitated for a moment before saying, "Actually, I have a portrait of him with me." It turned out that after Han Chinya passed away, Tadish's longing for him had turned into an illness. She had no choice but to transform her heart full of longing into a portrait and carry it with her at all times. Only then could she slightly pacify her sorrowful heart. Song Qing-shu was overjoyed. "I wonder if you can lend it to me to take a look?" Tadish hesitated for a moment. When she saw his pure eyes, she finally fished out a scroll from her bosom. Song Qing-shu received the scroll, which still had the lingering warmth of Tadish's body. He subconsciously brought it to his nose and sniffed it. Immediately, a delicate fragrance wafted over. He couldn't help but be startled. Could this be the legendary frankincense? Looking at Tadish's fiery gaze, Song Qing-shu hastily retracted his perverted face. He coughed once and unrolled the scroll with a deadpan expression. Immediately, a young man brimming with heroic spirit appeared vividly on the paper. Perhaps because Tadish hailed from the western regions, this painting did not resemble the freehand brushwork style of China. Instead, it resembled the realistic style of the Western countries. It resembled an oil painting and a sketch at the same time. Song Qing-shu couldn't differentiate it, but he could tell that this painting was similar to a photograph from his previous life. It was a perfect depiction of Han Chinya's appearance. He is indeed a man of striking appearance, especially that proud and aloof air between his brows. It leaves a deep impression. Song Qing-shu praised as he examined the painting. Hearing him praise her husband, Tadish's anger turned into joy. She revealed a shy smile. "Back then, I was also attracted by that proud and aloof air between his brows. That was why I fell in love at first sight." Seeing Tadish's face suddenly revealing a young lady's attitude, Song Qing-shu was struck. He hastily said, "I have a gift for Madam. Can Madam temporarily close your eyes?" "What are you planning to do?" Tadish looked at him with a guarded expression. Song Qing-shu smiled faintly. "Don't be so guarded. If I really want to do anything to you, it wouldn't matter whether you close your eyes or not." Tadish knew that his words weren't false. After hesitating for a moment, she eventually closed her eyes. However, her slightly trembling eyelashes indicated that her heart wasn't as tranquil as before. After approximately the time it takes for a joss stick to burn, Tadish couldn't help but ask, "Still not done?" "Done." Chapter 955. Han Chinya grasped her hand and smiled. "Have you missed me all these years?" "Yes." Tadish hurriedly nodded, her voice choked with emotion. "I have always missed you." "When did you miss me the most?" Han Chinya. His lips curled into a playful smile. Tadish's face blushed, seemingly recalling something as she whispered. In the dead of night. You have suffered all these years. Han Qinya opened his arms. Tadish hesitated for a moment, but still moved forward to accept his embrace. Ever since you left, I couldn't even eat or drink. If not for the fact that I had to investigate that foreign monk from the western regions who harmed you back then, I would have gone down to accompany you long ago. Tadish's tears flowed out from her eyes, quickly wetting the clothes covering her chest. Don't say such silly words. You must live well, Han Qinya. He gently caressed her soft hair and consoled her. The more exciting your life is, the happier I will be. Really? Tadish raised her head and stared blankly at him. Of course it's true, Han Qinya replied with a smile. Tadish bit her lips and eventually shook her head. But without you, how can I live an exciting life? Am I not here to accompany you? Han Qinya. Lifting her chin with his finger, he slowly kissed her. Seeing the other party approaching her lips, Tadish's eyelashes trembled incessantly, evidently feeling conflicted. With her intelligence, how could she not know that the husband before her was Song Qing in disguise? However, Song Qing's disguise was too similar, as though he was carved out of the same mold as Han Qinya. It caused her to feel as though time and space were in disarray, as though her husband was truly standing before her. She had been living alone for the past few years, feeling incomparably lonely, yearning for her husband year after year. Thus, even though she knew that the person before her was a fake, she was unwilling to expose him, hoping to see her husband for a while longer. However, Song Qing was obviously not someone who would remain unperturbed. How could she allow him to take advantage of her? While Tadish was hesitating, their lips had already touched, causing her almond eyes to widen involuntarily. That unfamiliar feeling made it impossible for her to deceive herself. She hurriedly pushed him away and turned her head away, muttering, "You're not Qinya." Han Qinya smiled, reverting to Song Qing's original voice. "So what if I am? So what if I'm not? Isn't it up to Madam's thoughts? Your disguise technique is truly brilliant. Even I couldn't see through it. If not for the fact that Qinya had passed away many years ago, I might have been fooled by you." Tadish couldn't help but sigh. Song Qing shook his head. "I did not intend to deceive you from the start." Tish was startled, but quickly understood. If Song Qing really wanted to deceive her, he didn't have to pretend to be Han Qinya at this moment. After all, the two of them were still conversing a moment ago. If he suddenly changed into another person, even a fool would be suspicious. "I just saw that you looked gloomy, so I purposely pretended to be Mr. Silverleaf to relieve your longing." Song Qing smiled. "Humph. Speaking of which, I should be thanking you. If you truly have such good intentions, why would you take advantage of this opportunity to take advantage of me?" Tadish snapped. "I'm not a saint who does good deeds without asking for anything in return. What's wrong with taking advantage of this opportunity to ask for a little reward?" Song Qing's matter-of-fact expression rendered Tadish momentarily speechless as she stood there in a daze. Song Qing put his arm around her waist and held her in his arms. "Madam, have you forgotten your situation? You are still my captive." Upon hearing the word captive, Tadish's gentle body instantly stiffened. Song Qing continued, "As I've told you before, I will obtain you tonight no matter what. However, in consideration of your concern for me during the assassination attempt, I could be exceptionally lenient and give you the leeway to choose." Tadish hurriedly asked, "What choice?" Song Qing gave a bewitching smile and whispered into her ear, "You can choose what appearance I will use to be intimate with you later. You can choose me or Han Qinya." Tadish's pink face immediately turned beet red. "Shameless and lowly bastard. Many thanks for Madam's praise." Song Qing paid no heed. "If Madam is done scolding me, you can make your choice. Will you choose me or your husband, Han Qinya?" He purposely emphasized on the word husband. Tadish angrily retorted, "Aren't both of them you? There is still a difference." Song Qing shook his head. "For example, my current appearance of Han Qinya should be easier for you to accept." "You scoundrel!" Tadish angrily turned her head away. "Since you are unwilling to make your choice, I will help you." Song Qing said as he pretended to remove his mask. Wait, Tadish hastily called out to him. Her expression fluctuated as she squeezed out a barely audible voice from her throat. Just like this. Song Qing revealed an expression as if he had long known this would happen. As you wish. On the second day, when Ouyang Feng saw Tadish following behind Song Qing, he couldn't help but tease, "Congratulations, old brother. You have gained another female confidant." With his eyesight, how could he not see the thick lust reveal between Tadish's brows? Song Qing smiled complacently and pulled Tadish over. Pressing on her shoulder, he said, "Come, greet Brother Feng." Tadish's face turned beet red. She had always been proud and arrogant. Being conquered by Song Qing was already embarrassing enough. Now that she was being teased by the two, how could she lower her face and speak? For a moment, she could only stand rooted to the ground, sulking. Ouyang Feng didn't mind and laughed. "We will be one family in the future. There is no need for sister-in-law to be shy. When I first met sister-in-law in the western regions, you were a peerless beauty. Even a blockhead like old brother couldn't help but be moved. After not seeing you for more than 10 years, sister-in-law is still so devastatingly beautiful, while I, old brother, am on the verge of death." Being addressed as sister-in-law, Tadish couldn't help but blush. She subconsciously replied, "I am not your sister-in-law." Song Qing laughed. "Brother Feng, you can call her Madame Han in the future." Ouyang Feng was startled at first, then he understood. "You little brat, but you are truly capable. When I met Madame Han at the Jin Imperial Palace, she was still as beautiful as ever. However, there was a hint of sadness and melancholy between her brows, causing her to pale in comparison to Zishan Dragon Queen's elegant demeanor. But in just one night, you have actually made her radiant again. Admirable, admirable." Ouyang Feng was a man of the evil path. Although he wasn't fond of women, he had no qualms when speaking. How could Tadish endure the teasing of the two old and young hoodlums? Even though she had been married for many years, she still blushed like a young girl. Like a wisp of smoke, she ran back to her tent. The two men couldn't help but smile at each other. After a while, Ouyang Feng suddenly turned serious and said, "Brother Song, you know that with my martial arts and age, I have no other thoughts in this life. My only hope is to take revenge on Guijing and Huang Rong. Not only did they kill my Kurer, they also caused me to go insane for more than 10 years. I must take revenge. But Guijing's martial arts are no weaker than mine. In addition, I am old and weak while he is still in his prime. If we really fight, I may not be able to defeat him. In addition, the couple's reputation is at its peak. They also have the support of the Southern Song government. My strength alone is not enough. That is why I had to rely on the Hailing Palace. Now that I am with you, I have no other requests. I only hope that you can help me take revenge. How does Brother Feng want me to help?" Song Qing hesitated for a moment before saying, "Huang Rong has helped me before. If I want their lives, I am afraid." Ouyang Feng shook his head. "I have known them for a long time. I know that the two of them are not people who are afraid of death. If I simply take their lives, I am afraid they won't even frown. How can that resolve the hatred in my heart?" "Then Brother Feng means—" Song Qing asked doubtfully. Ouyang Feng looked at him with a faint smile. "Boy, you are full of evil tricks. How can you not guess how I want to take revenge on the couple?" Song Qing's face heated up. He said embarrassedly, "Although I have a guess, I am not sure." Ouyang Feng laughed and said, "Don't think about it. It is just as you guessed. Don't they love each other? Aren't they a famous immortal couple? I want to break them up. I want Huang Rong to remarry and Guijing to marry someone else. Only in this way can I hurt both of them at the same time. This can be considered as helping Kuer take revenge." Song Qing was stunned. "Brother Feng, your plan is really bold. I only guessed that you're targeting Huang Rong. I didn't expect you to let Guijing marry someone else." Ouyang Feng deliberately looked at him. "Boy, your ability to conquer women is really unparalleled. The task of seducing Huang Rong naturally fell to you. Although I don't want to admit it, you are now not only young and handsome, your martial arts are top-notch. At the same time, you also have the power to turn your hand and summon the clouds and rain. As the ancients said, Becoming a general and entering the prime minister is no better than this. You can almost be called the perfect lover of all the girls in the boudoir. Song Qing hurriedly said, "Brother Feng is too kind, too kind." But the proud expression on his face showed that his true thoughts were not so humble. Ouyang Feng could see through his thoughts at a glance, but he didn't care. He snorted, "If you succeed in seducing Huang Rong, she may be heartbroken at first, but after a long time, she will definitely enjoy it. That would be too easy for that girl. That is why I want Guijing to marry someone else. I want her to constantly think of her beloved husband hugging another woman and having fun. I want her to suffer for the rest of her life." Chapter 956. The two of them were so familiar with each other that Ouyang Feng did not mind this kind of joke. He glanced at Song Qingshu from the corner of his eyes and laughed. "Compared to little brother, my tricks are not even worth mentioning." Song Qingshu couldn't help but awkwardly smile at the praise. However, he didn't quite accept it. In terms of skill, he was probably above Ouyang Feng, but in terms of viciousness, he really couldn't compare to Ouyang Feng. After laughing for a while, Ouyang Feng could not help but frown. "With your help, I have some confidence in making Huang Rong remarry. But Guijing, that silly boy, is stubborn and upright. To make him do something that will betray Huang Rong, I'm afraid it will be harder than ascending to heaven." "Is that so?" Song Qingshu replied non-committally, but in his mind, he was thinking about the time he met Zhao Min and Hua Zheng at the inn. Strictly speaking, Hua Zheng was Guo Jing's fiancée. In the end, the two of them did not end up together because of national hatred and Huang Rong's interference. Hua Zheng was originally a cheerful woman from the grasslands, but the last time Song Qingshu saw her, she looked distressed and weak, like a young lady from Jiangnan. Ouyang Feng thought that Song Qingshu could not do anything, so he said, "This matter cannot be rushed. Let's slowly think of a way. When we get to the mountain, there will be a way. Instead, I have to tell you about the assassin yesterday." Hearing him mention Yang Yaozhen, Song Qingshu also came back to his senses and listened attentively. Yesterday, Yang Yaozhen had led Qiu Qianren to a prepared ambush. If Ouyang Feng had not arrived in time, Qiu Qianren would probably have died there. Because of Song Qingshu's instructions, Ouyang Feng did not make things difficult for Yang Yaozhen. The other party was also afraid of the two grandmasters, so the two sides tested each other and returned. That assassin was obviously a young woman. Ouyang Feng suddenly had a strange expression. "Could it be that one of your lovers saw you with Purple Dragon Queen and became jealous?" Song Qingshu was speechless. "Brother Feng, your imagination is really rich. Why didn't I realize that you were so gossipy before?" If she wasn't your old lover, then why would you specifically instruct us to be lenient and not capture her?" Ouyang Feng's expression was one of understanding. Song Qingshu was momentarily at a loss for words. He knew the more he tried to explain, the worse things would get. Therefore, he might as well let Song Qingshu make wild guesses. After casually finding something to do, he returned to the tent to look for Taj Tish. Tadish was sitting alone on the bed, sulking. Upon seeing him enter, she immediately turned her body to the other side. Song Qingshu immediately laughed, walked over and asked, "What's wrong? Are you angry? You only know how to humiliate me." Taj Tish bit her lips, feeling increasingly wronged as she spoke. "Humiliating me for an entire night last night is not enough. Today, you even dragged your friend over to mock me." Song Qingshu sat by her side, hugged her shoulders, and turned her around. "How is this mocking? Ouyang Feng and I are very close. He treated you as one of his own and joked with you like that. Didn't you hear him calling you sister-in-law so intimately? If he was 10 years younger, I might even be jealous." Taj Tish unhappily rolled her eyes at him. "Ouyang Feng is already so old. Don't mention 10 years. Even if he was 20 years younger, there's no need for you to be jealous." Song Qingshu looked at her with a smile that wasn't a smile. "Why is that?" "Because," Taj Tish's cheeks blushed. "You know it yourself." "I really don't know. Why don't you explain it to me, madam?" The smile on Song Qingshu's face deepened. "Perverted." Taj Tish couldn't help but spit. Song Qingshu reached out and hooked her chin. He couldn't help but sigh. Madam is truly beautiful when you smile. It's a waste of your beautiful face to keep a straight face. If I didn't keep a straight face, who would I be smiling for? Tajtish sighed with a slightly dazed expression. Oh, Song Qingshu's expression changed. Madam means to say that you can specially smile for me in the future? Tajtish blushed and hastily replied, That's not what I meant. Song Qingshu interrupted her and smiled warmly. All right. There's no need to explain. I know that's not what you meant. However, this is my vision. I want you to specially smile for me in the future. Tajtish felt dizzy listening to him. After a long while, she regained her composure. You really know how to make a woman happy. If I knew you, and Qinya at the same time back then, I might really have been deceived by you. Don't use the word deceive. How can a matter of true love be called deceive? Song Qingshu chuckled. Hey, who is in true love with you? Tajtish did not know what was wrong with her. Why was she behaving like a little girl in front of a man who was so much younger than her? Although it isn't now, I believe that one day you will fall in love with me. Song Qingshu laughed. Dream on. Tajtish immediately threw the pillow on the bed at his head. Wow, you actually dare to murder your own husband. Are you keeping a gigolo outside? Hurry up and confess. Song Qingshu purposely put on a fierce expression as he tickled her. Tajtish cried out in alarm. She had the intention to dodge. However, with Song Qingshu's superior martial arts, how could she possibly evade? Very quickly, she was tickled until she trembled. Her body went limp, and she accidentally fell onto the bed. Song Qingshu seized the opportunity to press down on her. He laughed sinisterly beside her ear. Hurry up and tell me. What's the name of that gigolo? Is he the one surnamed Han that we met previously? Tajtish was both annoyed and amused. Han Qinya is my husband, all right. If you really want to talk about gigolo, you should be the one. She was tickled until she repeatedly begged for mercy. Subconsciously, she blurted out her thoughts. All right, it seems like I'm a gigolo, Song Qingshu said in a hindsight manner as he stared fixedly at her. Tajtish's face turned crimson. Her voluptuous chest heaved up and down slightly. Her scattered breath blew onto his face, causing Song Qingshu's heart to itch. Feeling the softness of her body, Song Qingshu could no longer restrain himself and kissed her. At this moment, a bodyguard's voice drifted in from outside, reporting to Marshal. The entire army is almost ready. Marshal, please board the carriage. Song Qingshu cursed endlessly in his heart, thinking how could the carriage outside be as comfortable as the rouge horse he was riding on? However, it was broad daylight now, and he was not so thick-skinned as to make 3,000 people wait for him alone in the tent. It was ridiculous. Tajtish sat up with a blushing face. While tidying up her messy clothes, she glanced at Song Qingshu with hidden bitterness. She wondered what kind of sin she committed in her previous life to fall in his hands in this one, especially when she recalled that he was only a few years older than her daughter. Tajtish felt an endless headache. When Xiao Zhao sees him, should she address him as brother or uncle? How should she explain their relationship to her daughter? The entire army finally set off. For the rest of the journey, Song Qingshu would either spend the night hugging Tajtish in the tent or bring her to his luxurious carriage during the day. Because Song Qingshu forbade anyone from approaching, the other soldiers didn't know what they were doing hiding inside. They only knew that the woman by the marshal's side was becoming more radiant by the day. Everyone secretly guessed that such a beautiful woman was the reincarnation of a vixen. Ouyang Feng's internal energy was profound. Occasionally, he could faintly hear some soft panting sounds that made him blush. He couldn't help but sigh inwardly. The new waves of the Yangtze River surpass the old. Each generation is wilder than the previous. Qiu Qianren secretly smacked his lips. His new master's abilities were truly monstrous. He was actually able to make the previously proud and arrogant Zishan Dragon Queen willingly become his basin. Qiu Qianren was born in the underworld of Jianghu. As a result, some of his words were contaminated with the vulgar language of the marketplace. Along the way, Song Qingshu enjoyed the pleasures of the world. After a few days, the main army finally arrived at Mount Zhongnan, where Chongyang Palace was located. Finally, Song Qing-shu alighted from the carriage that never left his residence, together with Tadish. The moment she revealed herself, gasps of astonishment could be heard from the surroundings. Tadish was born with a beauty that could bring calamity to a country and bring calamity to its people. In addition to Song Qing-shu's daily nurturing, she exuded an astonishing beauty. Looking at the beautiful woman with almond eyes and peach cheeks, even Pucha Qiuzhao, who had always disliked Song Qing-shu, couldn't help but admit that if she was a man and had such a beautiful woman by her side, she would probably hug her every day to seek pleasure. Looking at the envious and jealous gazes of the crowd, Song Qing-shu's expression did not change. But in his heart, he was overjoyed. No wonder all the great heroes from ancient times liked to find beautiful women as companions. Not only did they feel good, they could also enjoy the worship and envy of the people around them. Song Qing-shu coughed lightly, expelling those messy thoughts from his mind. After all, he was now the imperial marshal, so he couldn't do anything that was out of line. Thus, he looked up the mountain with a solemn expression and began to think about the following arrangements. Song Qing-shu's eyes suddenly focused. He saw a stone tablet under a pine tree at the foot of the mountain. The long grass covered the tablet, revealing the two words Eternal Spring. He walked over and brushed the grass to take a look. On the tablet was a poem. The poem said, "The boundless heavens look down upon us from above. We cannot save the suffering of the myriad spirits. Day and night, we suffer the death of 1,000 cuts. We swallow our anger and die speechlessly. We look up to the heavens and cry out loud. Peace and tranquility. We do not need to teach the creation of spirits." So it's a poem written by the son of eternal spring, Qiu Chuji. Song Qing-shu was silent. In history, the Chuanjin sect was not an anti-Mongolian hero. Rather, they sent Qiu Chuji to seduce Temujin. Later, they became the representative of the Mongols in the Central Plains. If it wasn't for the fact that they lost to the Tantric sect in the famous debate, perhaps they would have become the official religion of the Mongols. Because of this relationship, Song Qing-shu never had a good impression of the Chuanjin sect. This was especially true of Qiu Chuji. The two of them had even become enemies during the Golden Snake Gathering. But when Song Qing-shu saw this poem, he had to admit that although Qiu Chuji had all sorts of problems, he at least had a compassionate heart. When he went to see Temujin, although it was for the sake of the Chuanjin sect, to a large extent, he also saved countless people from the suffering of the Mongols. This kind of merit could be said to be immeasurable. Song Qing-shu, who came from the future, had received a people-oriented education. He was not like the ambitious and ruthless people of this world who treated human lives like weeds. Thus, Qiu Chuji's actions were very much in line with his intentions. Because of your actions in the past, you saved the Chongyang Palace from a disaster. Chapter 9:57. Song Qing-shu ordered a deputy to stay at the foot of the mountain, while he and the other experts led a small number of guards up the mountain. If there was a need, they would send a letter to summon the rest of the troops up the mountain. Of course, in Song Qing-shu's mind, this kind of situation would never happen. After all, aside from himself, there were also experts like Ouyang Feng and Xiu Qianren. Even Zishan Dragon Queen Tashkis was enough to cause the declining Chuanjin sect to suffer the consequences. Dozens of people walked up the mountain. At the front was a group of bodyguards scouting the way. Song Qing-shu and Tashkis walked in the middle, while Ouyang Feng and Xiu Qianren stood to the left and right. The two of them had enmity with the Chongyang sect, so on this journey, their faces revealed a trace of excitement. Pucha Qiuzhao brought the Pucha family's bodyguards and followed closely behind them. Looking at the intimate silhouettes of Song Qing-shu and Tashkis, she frowned and hesitated on whether or not she should tell goodbye about this when they returned to the capital. The group of people climbed up the mountain and quickly met two Taoist priests, but the two were immediately restrained. Song Qing-shu did not want to kill too many people, so he sealed their acupuncture points and threw them into the weeds by the side of the road. The group of people then continued on their way. After walking like this for 2 hours, Song Qing had no choice but to stop. He followed the mountain path and saw that the road was steep with jagged rocks and numerous cliffs. He couldn't help but secretly think, this Chongyang Palace is a place that is easy to defend but hard to attack. If a master of military strategy occupied this place, then the 5,000 men under him would be able to defend against an army of 100,000. Ever since Song Qingshu's lightness kung fu reached a high level, he had never walked at such a slow speed. With his current speed, he didn't know how long it would take. Brother Feng, how much longer until we reach Chongyang Palace? Song Qingshu inquired as he looked at Ouyang Feng. Ouyang Feng had infiltrated Chongyang Palace many times and even went to the extremely secretive ancient tomb, so he was the most suitable guide. Looking at the surroundings, Ouyang Feng answered, "This is the Golden Lotus Pavilion. If you go further up, you will reach the Sun Moon Cliff. Behind that is the Bao Zi Cliff. After the Bao Zi Cliff, you will reach the Sword Cleansing Pool. If you go further up the Sword Cleansing Pool, you will reach the Chongyang Hall." "How much longer do we have to walk at our current speed?" Song Qingshu asked with a frown. He had also experienced the tempering of blood and fire on the battlefield. He knew that in such a dangerous terrain, they had to take the enemy by surprise and end the battle quickly. He didn't know what was going on today, but the Chongyang Palace guards seemed to be very slow to react. But he couldn't hope that their reactions would always be this slow. Once Chongyang Palace sent out experts to defend the place, apart from a few experts, the rest of the ordinary soldiers would have a hard time. "I'm afraid it'll take another 4 hours." Ouyang Feng had long been impatient with this speed, but he didn't know what Song Qingshu was thinking, so he didn't say anything. "Walking like this is too slow. We will go up first and get rid of the guards along the way. Miss Chiu Chao, you can bring the others up slowly," Song Qingshu ordered. Pucha Chiu Chao hesitated and said, "Chongyang Palace is known as the #1 sect in the world. Wouldn't a few of you be too weak and cause us to be defeated one by one?" Pucha Chiu Chao came from a military family. Although he had never been on the battlefield, he knew some principles from what he had seen and heard. Before, when he saw Song Qingshu leave the troops at the foot of the mountain, he was already a bit unhappy. Now that he wanted to split up again, he couldn't help but protest. Song Qingshu smiled slightly. When Wang Chongyang was still alive, Chongyang Palace was indeed the #1 sect in the world. It's a pity that Chongyang Palace is getting weaker with each generation. They're strong on the outside, but weak on the inside. Not to mention, there are also top experts like Mr. Ouyang and Chief Chiu. They were existences that almost destroyed Chongyang Palace. Not to mention, we're going up together. Miss Chiu Chao doesn't need to worry." Pucha Chiu Chao had heard her brother Pucha Shiji mention Western poison Ouyang Feng and the others. She hesitated and said, "Fine, but I want to go up with you." When she first saw Yang Guo at the coming-of-age ceremony, she fell in love with him at first sight. She secretly gathered information about him and found out that he had once studied martial arts at Chongyang Palace. So this time, she begged her father to send her up with them. She wanted to see the place where he had once lived, and at the same time, she wanted to take revenge for Yang Guo, who had been bullied by those stinky Taoists. But if she let Ouyang Feng and the others go up first, they might casually destroy Chongyang Palace. Wouldn't this trip be in vain? Hearing that she wanted to go up with them, Song Qingshu hesitated for a moment. "But Miss Chiu Chao, your lightness skill." He did not say too much, but his meaning was clear. The people going up are all experts. A little girl like you should just forget about it. Pucha Chiu Chao wrinkled her nose and snorted. She pointed at Tashkis and said, "Prince Consort, you don't have to worry. Although my martial arts cannot compare to Mr. Ouyang and the others, my lightness skill is still passable. No matter how weak it is, it won't be any worse than her." As a woman, she subconsciously hated Song Qingshu's behavior of fooling around outside. She also disliked Tashkis. In her heart, Tashkis was a vixen who destroyed other people's families. Of course, she was an extremely beautiful vixen. As the eldest daughter of the Pucha family, she naturally did not have a good impression of this kind of woman. "Are you sure?" Song Qingshu said with a smile that was not a smile. Beside him, Ouyang Feng and Xiu Qianren also had a pondering expression. Pucha Qiu Chao was young and did not have much experience at Jianghu, but the two of them were clear of Tajki's status. Don't think that she was currently at Song Qingshu's side like a plaything. In the past, she was the illustrious Shan Dragon Queen, the head of the four kings of the Ming dynasty. How could a little girl like her compare to her martial arts? Tajkis's expression turned cold. During this period of time, she had been incomparably depressed. Everyone around her was stronger than her, especially in front of Song Qingshu. The martial arts and lightness skill that she was so proud of were not even worth mentioning. Who would have thought that even a rich young lady would look down on her martial arts? Of course, Pucha Qiu Chao raised her chin like a proud little peacock. Tajkis coldly said, "How about we make a bet? Whoever loses will become the other's servant girl." Sensing Tajkis's tone, Pucha Qiu Chao obviously hesitated for a moment. But when she saw the hint of ridicule on the other party's face, she immediately blurted out, "Bet it is, but you cannot look for help from others." She sized up Tajtish from top to bottom. She had a charming peach blossom face, towering breasts, slender waist, perky buttocks, and long legs. Even a mountain breeze seemed as though it would blow her away. Such a woman's only value in this world was to be a plaything for a man to vent his desires on the bed. Could it be that she really knew some brilliant martial arts? Chapter 958. During this period of time, she had been harassed daily by Song Qingshu, that devil star maniac. Tajkis had long been unable to bear the criticism, but what made her even more unbearable was the disdain in Pucha Qiucao's eyes along the way. As a fellow woman, how could she not see the meaning in the other party's eyes? Humph, who asked you to be so virtuous and virtuous? Wait till you become my maid. I will have plenty of opportunities to restrain you. At that time, I will change your appearance and let you have a taste of that devil star maniac's might, Tajkis thought maliciously. She was originally a person who was neither good nor evil. Regardless of whether it was Zishan Dragon King or Grandmother Golden Flower, they were all extreme people who killed people like scything flax. Taking revenge on a little girl like that, she did not feel the slightest bit apologetic. Pucha Qiucao did not know that she had already fallen into someone else's scheme. Her face was full of excitement as she prepared for the next match. Song Qingshu smiled faintly, treating it as a little joke between the two women. The journey up the mountain was already somewhat boring. Adding this little interlude was also good. Then the Chongyang Palace's main hall will be the end point. Whoever arrives first will be the winner. Do you have any objections? Seeing that the two women did not show any objections, Song Qingshu waved his hand. Begin. As soon as he finished speaking, the two women simultaneously moved. Pucha Qiucao was born in a family of generals and had a long history of martial arts. Furthermore, she had an older brother who was known as the #1 young expert of the Jin Kingdom who would give her pointers at any time. Her martial arts were relatively good. Looking at the entire Jin Kingdom, perhaps among the young female experts, other than Wanyan Zhongjia, she was the strongest. Even Wanyan Ping was only on par with her. It was a pity that her opponent this time was the illustrious Shan Dragon King of Jianghu. She floated forward as if riding the wind. With a few leaps, she had already reached the waist of the mountain, leaving Pucha Qiucao far behind. Pucha Qiucao's expression instantly turned ugly. She knew that she had fallen into her opponent's trap, but her stubborn nature made her unwilling to admit defeat just like that. She gritted her teeth and chased after him with all her might. Song Qingshu, along with Ouyang Feng and Xiu Qianren, leisurely followed behind them, admiring the beautiful figures of the two women as they competed. However, Song Qingshu's mind was preoccupied with another matter. Previously at Daxing Prefecture, he had forgotten to ask Wanyan Chongjia who her master was. He did not know which master had taught her such a high level of martial arts, allowing her to become one of the top experts of Jianghu at such a young age. It seemed that he would have to ask her properly the next time he returned to Daxing Prefecture. We've arrived at the Sun Moon Rock. Ouyang Feng's voice reached the two women's ears, reminding them of their current location. Tadish was the first to arrive. Without the slightest hesitation, she continued galloping. Not long after, Pucha Autumn Grass also arrived. He followed behind with a gloomy expression. After passing the Sun Moon Rock, the two women, one in front and one behind, leapt through the wilderness. Very quickly, they arrived at the Bao Zi cliff that Ouyang Feng had previously mentioned. This time, even without Ouyang Feng's explanation, they could recognize it. This was because the Bao Zi cliff looked extremely strange, like a woman carrying a child. After a while, they saw a large boulder blocking their path. Its shape was sinister and terrifying. It descended from the sky, like an old woman bending over to look down. Tadish frowned slightly and suddenly stopped. Just as Pucha Autumn Grass was feeling puzzled, she suddenly heard a few whistles from behind the rock. 4 Taoist priests leapt out, each holding a long sword. They blocked their path. Looking at their attire, they should be the guards that Chongyang Palace had placed on the main roads. Out of the way. Tadish didn't care about these insignificant 4 Taoist priests. She was worried that if they delayed, Pucha Autumn Grass would seize the initiative. If that happened, her entire plan would go down the drain. Scram! Tadish said coldly. The 4 Taoist priests were all startled. They were initially stunned, speechless by this outrageously beautiful woman in front of them. The youngest among them was even more shaken, and his face flushed red when she glanced at him with her wavy eyes. The few of them wanted to ask her the reason for her visit. Who would have thought that she would be so impolite as soon as she opened her mouth? The older Taoist was immediately enraged. Young lady, you dare to come to Mount Zhongnan and show off your strength? You must be tired of living. Although Tadish was already over 30 years old, her appearance was too beautiful. Even after so many years, time did not seem to have left a single trace on her. In addition, she had been diligently nurtured by Song Qingshu for the past few days. Her face was like a peach blossom, and her entire body released an astonishing charm. The Taoist priest did not know her background and thought that she was a virgin. Tadish coldly snorted. The Taoist priest's vision blurred. Before he could clearly see what was going on, he received a resounding slap to the face. The rest of the Taoist priests were instantly enraged. Their swords swayed as they stepped on a strange gate and moved in a strange direction. A stance of parting flowers and brushing willows stabbed towards her waist. The young Taoist priest could not bear to do this and deliberately moved his sword 3 inches to the side. Seeing that Tadish was entangled by the Taoist priests, Pucha Qiucao was delighted. Without hesitation, she overtook and ran up the mountain. Because the Taoist priests wanted to deal with Tadish, they could only watch helplessly as she rushed over. At this moment, the older Taoist priest also reacted. He raised his sword and thrust it towards her chest. The sword had always been light and agile, paying particular attention to the side. It could not be forcefully chopped and slashed like a single saber. Because of the humiliation he had just suffered, he was filled with hatred. Therefore, he did not have too many misgivings. Seeing the tip of the sword about to pierce her, Tadish did not panic. Her 10 slender fingers aimed at the tip of the sword and flicked it. A wong sound was heard. The Taoist priest's grip loosened, and the sword flew up into the air. Without waiting for the sword to fall, the other 3 swords flew into the air, their blades gleaming under the sunlight. What a good purple road dragon king. Her movements actually have a bit of old heretic Huang's charm. Ouyang Feng saw everything clearly from the back. The Eastern heretic and the Western poison were equally famous, so naturally he was very familiar with Huang Yaoshi's divine flicking finger. Tash's finger flicks were certainly not as exquisite as the divine flicking finger, but against this kind of trash, her finger flicks were sufficiently marvelous. The swords of the 4 Taoist priests flew out of their hands, but they still didn't know what method the other party had used. The elderly Taoist shouted, "Everyone be careful. This demoness knows evil magic. Let's retreat first." Tash's mind was completely focused on her match with Pucha Qiucao. Seeing the 4 people running away, she did not pay them any attention. She directly chased after Pucha Chiozao. The 4 Taoist priests leaped to the back of the old woman crag and dashed through the rubble. The other 3 Taoist priests followed behind. Just as they were about to disappear into the darkness, Song Qingshu casually kicked a gravel on the roadside. The gravel shot out. The 4 Taoist priests cried out in unison and fell to the ground. Qiu Qianren's expression was normal, but his heart was extremely shocked. It's not difficult to hit 4 Taoist priests, but to lift something as heavy as if it's light and stroll in the courtyard, it's impossible for me to do that. I've fought him several times before. Luckily, he was lenient. Otherwise, I'm afraid my old life would be in danger. Chapter 9:59. Tajkis was anxious, and her body sped up. But not long after, the sound of weapons clashing could be heard from the distant pine forest. When she saw the situation clearly, the corners of her mouth couldn't help but curl up. It turned out that Pucha Chiozao was fighting with 7 Taoist priests. She tried to break out of the encirclement several times, but the 7 Taoist priests worked together seamlessly, firmly surrounding her in the middle. Although her life was not in danger for the time being, it was impossible for her to escape. Tajkis pursed her lips and smiled. "Thank you, little sister, for blocking the enemy for Big Sister. Big Sister will make a move first." Saying that, she flew up the mountain. Tajkis was anxious and regretful. If she had known earlier, she would have blocked Old Woman Yen. After all, there were only 4 Taoist priests there while there were 7 here. Although there were only 3 more, their coordination was incomparably exquisite. The pressure she faced was increasing. Being able to protect herself was already good enough, let alone continuing the competition. Tajkis was about to move forward when suddenly a sword light flashed in front of her. When the Taoist priests heard her address them as Big Sister, they thought that the 2 girls were in cahoots and separated themselves to block her path. Tajkis's delicate brows knitted together and was about to use the same trick again when she discovered that her flick was unable to deflect the opponent's weapon. Instead, her finger was almost injured by another person's sharp sword. Apart from the 7 Taoist priests whose martial arts were above the previous 4, they had also formed the world-famous Big Dipper formation of Chongyang Palace. Every move's power was superimposed by the 7 of them. Naturally, Tajkis was unable to move. With this delay, the 7 Taoist priests took the opportunity to surround the 2 girls in the formation, their 7 sharp swords continuously attacking the 2. Tajkis's brows furrowed deeper and deeper. She could clearly feel that her martial arts were far above those Taoist priests. If she were to fight one-on-one, she was afraid that no one would be able to withstand 3 moves from her. But she didn't know why. When the 7 of them worked together, her hands and feet were tied. Sometimes, when she was clearly about to strike someone down, the person's companions would counterattack, forcing her to change her moves. She tried several methods, but in the end, if she struck the head, the tail would respond, the head would respond, and if she struck the waist, the head and the tail would respond. The 2 girls were firmly trapped in the formation. Their space to move became smaller and smaller, and finally, they had no choice but to face the enemy back to back. Tajkis was inwardly furious. Were it not for Song Qingshu toying with her body like a pampered concubine, she wouldn't be in such a lack of weapons and concealed weapons. If she had a weapon, she would have been able to use her powerful internal energy to break the opponent's long sword. If she had a concealed weapon, these few Taoist priests would have died under her golden flower of life. They wouldn't have to fight like they were now. Song Qingshu and the other 2 were already watching from the side. Ouyang Feng couldn't help but sigh. Wang Chongyang is indeed a genius. The Big Dipper, Heavenly Dipper formation he created is incomparably marvelous. It actually allowed a few people with ordinary martial arts to resist an expert whose martial arts are far superior to theirs. If the Chuanjin 7 Masters were to personally use it, its power would be even more extraordinary. It must be known that even the strongest of the Chuanjin 7 Masters, Qiu Chuji, would lose his life in a few moves if he were to face any one of the Eastern Heretic, Western Poison, Southern Emperor, or Northern Beggar. Unexpectedly, the Chuanjin Seven Masters were able to resist Huang Yaoshi without falling into a disadvantageous position. Ouyang Feng couldn't help but feel admiration. Song Qingshu was thinking about another problem. When Shi Jiguang battled the Woku pirates, the number of casualties caused countless history buffs to gasp in amazement. Oftentimes, the enemy would die by the hundreds or thousands, while the Qi family army would only suffer minor injuries. It must be known that many of the Woku pirates were wandering samurai from the Warring States period of Japan. Among them, there was no lack of top-notch experts. In the early days, a few dozen Woku pirates were enough to sweep an entire province. There were many reasons for this heaven-defying battle, but everyone believed the most important was the Qi family army's special formation. Naturally, Song Qingshu didn't understand those formations, but there were many mystical formations in this world. For example, the Beggar Clan's Big Dog Formation, Wudong's True Martial Seven Sections Formation, Shaolin's Great Luan Formation, and Chongyang Palace's Big Dipper Formation. All of them had the effect of allowing a group of ordinary martial arts to defeat a top-notch expert. If these formations could be integrated into the army, wouldn't his own army be invincible? Song Qingshu's eyes flashed, and he began to carefully observe the opponent's formation. If the Chuanjin Seven Masters were to personally use it, Song Qingshu wouldn't be able to find any flaws with his cultivation level. However, the martial arts of the Taoists before him were too inferior. After observing for a moment, Song Qingshu was able to find some clues. Tajkiss Autumn Grass, take 4 steps to the left and 5 steps back. Song Qingshu opened his mouth and said. Pucha and Autumn Grass were still hesitant, but Tajkiss knew how high Song Qingshu's martial arts were, so naturally she wouldn't doubt them. She pulled her along and walked towards the direction pointed by Song Qingshu. The 7 Taoists saw that they had retreated to an inexplicable place and didn't understand what was going on. The Taoist, named Tian Quan, let out a low whistle and subconsciously led the 6 paths to the left and continued to surround the 2 people. The 7 stars of the Big Dipper were shaped like a spoon, and the tip of the spoon was made up of the 3 stars, Dubhe, Merak, and Fekta. The handle was made up of the Alioth, Kaiyong, and Yaoguang. Connecting the spoon to the handle was the Tian Quan star. Therefore, the Tian Quan person must be the strongest among the 7, and would be responsible for advancing and retreating. Song Qingshu continued, take 2 steps to the right. Tajkiss and Pucha and Autumn Grass moved according to his instructions. The Taoist Tian Quan originally planned to use the spoon handle and the other 2 to launch an attack. But he suddenly discovered that the positions of the 2 women were extremely strange. The swords of the 3 of them couldn't reach them, and instead the 7 of them were all wide open, unable to defend against each other, and each person would be vulnerable to the other's attacks. Immediately, he waved his left hand and led the formation to turn around. Who knew that as soon as the Taoist Yao Guang moved his feet, Song Qingshu spoke again, take 2 steps to the right. Seeing that they had forced the opponent's formation back for the first time, the 2 women's spirits rose, and without hesitation, they followed his instructions. The 7 Taoists once again set up the Big Dipper formation, and were stunned to discover that they were still in an awkward situation where it was difficult to attack and difficult to defend. Wonderful! Ouyang Feng also saw the clues. You told them to firmly stand at the North Star position, so the flaw of the Big Dipper formation is here. Song Qingshu smiled, and also admired Ouyang Feng's foresight. The Big Dipper formation was one of the best martial arts of the Chuanjin sect, and when it was practiced to perfection with 7 highly skilled martial artists working together, it could be said to be invincible. However, according to the laws of the heavenly way, all things in the world reinforce and subdue each other. It was impossible for there to be a martial art that was completely flawless in this world. Facing this formation, as long as one occupied the position of the North Star, one would be able to control the slaves as the master, and the Big Dipper formation would be bound, unable to display its power freely. Of course, this was also because the 7 Taoists were not proficient in this formation and did not understand the importance of the North Star position. If my Yu, Qiu Chuji and the others were in charge of the formation, they would not allow the enemy to easily occupy the North Star position. Following this, the 7 Taoists changed their positions several times, and Song Qingshu guided them from the side, making sure that the 2 women occupied the key positions. The Tianshu Taoist was old and wise, and saw that something was wrong, and called out, "Change the formation." The 3rd stage, there were still 14 stages left. Chapter 960. As soon as he finished, the 7 Taoists scattered, rushing left and right, running east and west, thinking that this would confuse the enemy. Suddenly, the 7 Taoists formed the formation again. But the position of the Big Dipper handle and the Big Dipper handle had changed, and the formation had changed from west to southeast. Song Qingshu frowned and immediately told the 2 women to change their positions. The 7 Taoists saw that the formation was complete. Tianshu and Yu Hong raised their swords and rushed forward, but then they saw the 2 women standing north of the Big Dipper handle, forming a triangle. The 2 Taoists were startled. "If the 2 of us rush forward, won't Kai Yang and Tian Xian be seriously injured?" In that moment, Tian Quan Taoist shouted out, "We can't attack, quickly retreat." He was startled and angry and whistled loudly, causing the 6 Taoists to change their formation. Qiu Qianren saw that the 7 Taoists were running around madly, while the 2 women only needed to follow Song Qingshu's instructions to move east or west, south or north, and the 7 Taoists didn't dare to attack them. Qiu Qianren's admiration for Song Qingshu increased. Song Qingshu felt that the time was right and said, "Tajkis, Qiu Chao, prepare to break the formation, take 2 steps to the left." After changing the formation several times, the 2 women were completely convinced by Song Qingshu and followed his instructions without hesitation. The 7 Taoists were alarmed, and now they realized that the Big Dipper formation was completely under the control of the 2 women. If the 2 women rushed to the left, the 7 Taoists would have no way to defend themselves, and that would be extremely dangerous in martial arts, so they had no choice but to follow to the left. Because of this, the 7 Taoists were unable to extricate themselves. If the 2 women ran quickly, the 7 Taoists would run quickly. If the 2 women walked slowly, the 7 Taoists would walk slowly. The Taoist martial arts were not as good as Tajkis and Qiu Chao, and very quickly they became strained. The young Taoist's internal energy was the weakest, so after being carried around by the 2 women for more than 10 rounds, he felt dizzy and had difficulty breathing. In a blink of an eye, he was about to fall, but he knew that if there was one less person in the Big Dipper formation, the whole formation would collapse immediately, so he clenched his teeth and tried his best to hold on. The most powerful part of the Big Dipper formation was that the left and right sides of the formation could help each other. Since the enemy was attacking Kai Yang, Alcade and Alioth had no choice but to jump down from the tree to help. Once these 2 came down, Dubhe and Migres had to follow. In an instant, the entire formation was affected. The 2 women followed Song Qingshu's instructions, advancing and retreating freely in the formation, as if they were dancing. As soon as he took the North Star position, he quickly turned to the left side of the Big Dipper formation. The Heavens Powers Path knew how powerful they were. They didn't have the time to admire the 2 girls' beautiful bodies, hurriedly moving to the right. When 2 people fight, they must face the enemy. If the enemy goes behind them, they must immediately turn around to face the enemy. Right now, the 2 women were heading towards the vital points of the Big Dipper formation. I didn't need to attack. The 7 Taoists had no choice but to move the formation to face them. The 2 women remembered Song Qingshu's instructions and kept moving to the left, not turning around. Sometimes fast, sometimes slow, sometimes straight, sometimes slanted, they kept moving to the left. The 2 of them firmly occupied the North Star position. The 7 Taoists had no choice but to follow them to the left. The 2 of them ran faster and faster. In the end, they were so fast that the tips of their toes touched the ground, and they were already several feet away. The 7 Taoist martial arts were not ordinary. although they were in dire straits. The formation didn't become chaotic. Dubhe, Merak, Fekta, Migres, Alioth, Kaiyong, and Alcade. These 7 positions were protected firmly and accurately, but they couldn't stop themselves from following the 2 women. Even Ouyang Feng couldn't help but cheer. Chuanjin's disciples, they really do have some skill. The reason why Song Qing-shu told the 2 women to use their lightness kung fu and not to counterattack was because the Big Dipper formation had a tight defense. There were almost no weak points. If they wanted to break the formation, they would have to take some risks. Right now, he had already treated Tajkis as his pet. Her entire body was flawless. If she was left with even the slightest wound, it wouldn't be worth it. Because of that, he used a more reliable method, using the 2 women's lightness kung fu to exhaust the 7 Daos. As expected, the 7 Daos could barely keep up at first, but as time went on, the difference in their lightness kung fu began to show. Tian Quan, Tian Shu, and Alioth's kung fu were higher, so they ran faster. The rest of the people gradually fell behind, and a gap began to appear in the Big Dipper formation. Song Qing-shu smiled faintly and said a few words. The 2 women took advantage of that gap and injured the light-shaking realm Daos. Now that the Big Dipper formation was down by 1 person, it could no longer be formed. Without the formation support, the remaining Daos were no match for the 2 women. Very soon, they all fell to the ground, clutching their wounds and moaning in pain. Song Qing-shu smiled bitterly to himself. Autumn Grass was a Jurchen nobleman, so naturally she wouldn't care about the lives of commoners. Tajkis was also a character who killed without batting an eye. Previously, she had been humiliated by the 7 Daos Big Dipper formation, so it wasn't surprising that she was a little ruthless. Fortunately, the 2 women remembered his orders. Although the 7 Daos had suffered some serious injuries, his life wasn't in danger. After the 2 women defeated the 7 Daos, they looked at each other. Then, without saying a word, they charged up the mountain. Song Qing-shu was dumbstruck. They still haven't forgotten about the competition. Women are really persistent in this aspect. Song Qing-shu leisurely followed behind them, with Ouyang Feng and Qiu Qianren. He saw that Tajkis and Pucha Autumn Grass were gradually pulling apart. Just when he thought that she had won, he suddenly discovered that Tajkis had stopped halfway up the mountain. Pucha Autumn Grass was secretly delighted. She hastened her steps and rushed up. However, when she reached Tadish's side, she saw the situation clearly and stopped. Song Qing-shu had already sensed the presence of quite a number of people up there. He couldn't help but frown. With a tap of his foot, he transformed into a shadow and appeared beside the 2 women in an instant. Ouyang Feng and Qiu Qianren looked at each other, both seeing the shock in each other's eyes. Mr. Qiu, you boasted that your Qin Gong was #1 in the world. What do you think now? Ouyang Feng teased. Qiu Qianren shook his head and smiled bitterly. Mr. Ouyang, there's no need to make sarcastic remarks. How would I dare to mention Qin Gong in front of young master? Ouyang Feng sighed as well. If he was present during the sword meet of Mount Hua, I wonder if Wang Chongyang would still be the world's #1. Qiu Qianren was startled. Even though he had vaguely guessed that Song Qing-shu's martial arts was already above Ouyang Feng's, that was only a guess. Today was the first time he had heard Ouyang Feng admit it personally. Moreover, it was directly compared to Wang Chongyang. One must know that the Eastern Heretic, Western Poison, Southern Emperor, and Northern Beggar were all proud and arrogant individuals. Because of their exceptional martial arts, there were only a handful of people in the world that they would place in their eyes. The only person who could convince all 4 of them at the same time was Wang Chongyang. During the sword meet of Mount Hua, the 5 of them fought for 7 days and 7 nights. Wang Chongyang defeated and convinced the other 4 and was crowned the #1. One must know that in the return of the Condor heroes, Ouyang Feng and Hong Qigong fought for 3 days and 3 nights before both of them perished. Before they died, neither submitted to the other. However, Wang Chongyang managed to convince the other 4 to submit within 7 days and 7 nights. His realm was probably at least a level higher than the other 4. Chapter 9:61. Song Qing-shu came to the side of the two girls and found that in front of him was a large circle surrounded by mountains. At the foot of the mountains was a large pond. The water reflected the moon and flashed with silver light. This should be the cleansing sword pond that Ouyang Feng mentioned before. At this time, there were hundreds of Taoists standing in front of the pond. They all wore yellow crowns and gray robes. They held long swords in their hands, and their swords flashed with dazzling light. Song Qingshu's eyes narrowed. The Taoists were in groups of 7, forming 14 Big Dipper formations. Every 7 Big Dipper formations formed a Big Dipper formation. From Tianshu to Yao Guang, the power was no small matter. The 2 Big Dipper formations, one normal and one strange, mutually reinforcing and restraining each other. Song Qingshu suddenly understood. No wonder the two of them stopped in their tracks. The Big Dipper formation had almost forced the two of them into a corner, and now the formation's power was more than 10 times stronger. Who are you? How dare you trespass into Chongyang Palace? State your name. The leader of the group was a long Taoist. Song Qingshu did not have any contact with Chongyang Palace, so he did not recognize his name. Ouyang Feng and Qiu Qianren also came up at this time. They were of high status in Jianghu. Even Ma Yu and Xiu Chuji were considered their juniors. They could not even recognize people of Yin Jiping and Zhao Zijing's generation, let alone the person in front of them. Being questioned by the Taoist, Song Qingshu smiled and did not get angry. He replied, "We are the emissaries of the Jin Kingdom. We are here to bestow a title to your sect." The Jin Kingdom? Hearing his reply, the group of Taoists began to whisper to each other. The Chuanjin sect had always been righteous in Jianghu. The founder of the sect, Wang Chongyang, was also a righteous man who fought against the Jin Kingdom. As a disciple, how could they not know of this relationship? For many years, the Jin Kingdom had a lot of things to deal with, so they did not have the time to pay attention to the Chongyang sect. Therefore, both sides had lived in harmony. Why did the Jin Kingdom suddenly want to bestow a title? Although the Taoist was only a 4th-generation disciple, he was older and more knowledgeable. He knew that this title could not be accepted, otherwise Chongyang Palace would not be able to stand in Jianghu. However, Chongyang Palace was currently under the jurisdiction of the Jin Kingdom, and Chongyang Palace did not dare to openly rebel against the Jin Kingdom, so they still had to put on a show. The Taoist coughed and replied, "I hope you will forgive us. Today, our sect is in the midst of the new sect leader's inauguration ceremony. During this time, we will not receive any guests. You may rest at the foot of the mountain, and after our sect leader's inauguration ceremony, we will send someone to invite you. He of the palace of the sect, and he of the sect of the Jianghu. He of the sect of him." Song Qingshu nodded his head. No wonder they had set up defenses along the way. Today was the ceremony for the new sect leader of Chongyang Palace. On the way up, not only did they set up the Big Dipper formation, they also set up the 2 Big Dipper formations. This was to prevent enemies from invading. After all, Chongyang Palace was once the #1 sect in the world. Although in recent years it was getting worse with each generation, it still had its foundation. In the original The Return of the Condor Heroes, they were caught unprepared by the Mongols. This was because 2 sect leaders were changed in one day. In addition, Zhao Zijing's faction and Yin Jiping's faction were fighting. In this world, Zhao Zijing had already been killed by Song Qingshu. There was no one to fight with Yin Jiping for the position of the sect leader. Chongyang Palace could naturally set up their defenses normally. Hearing the Taoist words, Song Qingshu immediately understood his intentions. Before he could say anything, Pu Cha Chiu Chao spoke first. "What are you talking about? We are here to confer a title. It just so happens that your sect leader is here at the ceremony. As the saying goes, there's no time like the present. With the conferment from the imperial court, wouldn't your new sect leader be more justifiable?" The group of Taoist faces were filled with anger. They thought to themselves, why do we need the conferment from the imperial court of the Jin Kingdom for it to be justifiable? If it wasn't for the fact that they knew the importance of the matter, they would have scolded him. The elder Taoist's face darkened. He replied coldly, "I've already said that during the inauguration ceremony, my sect will not receive any guests." Qiu Qianren coldly laughed. "What if we insist on going up?" The elder Taoist coldly snorted. He pulled out his long sword and waved it in the air. The blade of the sword cut through the air. His voice rang out for a long time. "I have the heavy responsibility of guarding the mountain. If you force your way in, then please forgive me for my rudeness." As soon as he finished speaking, the rest of the Taoists waved their long swords. 98 swords flew back and forth, stirring up a gust of wind. The light of the swords formed a dazzling net of light. Because this time Yin Jiping was taking over as the sect leader, all of the third-generation disciples were his fellow disciples. Naturally, they had to personally attend the ceremony. Therefore, the guards that were arranged to guard the mountain were all fourth- and fifth-generation disciples. Even though their seniority was not high, they were all carefully selected from the same generation. Therefore, when they waved their swords at the same time, their power was not to be underestimated. Ouyang Feng snorted. Wang Chongyang's disciples are becoming more and more useless. Relying on the Big Dipper formation that he left behind, they become arrogant. Isn't it just because they are good at bullying others? It's just the Big Dipper formation. I don't care about it. The group of Taoists was enraged. "You really talk big. If you really have the ability, you could try our Big Dipper formation." This group of Taoists were mostly young disciples. They had not seen the scene of Ouyang Feng breaking into Chongyang Palace. Otherwise, they would not be so rude. Ouyang Feng laughed. "I'll try it." As soon as he finished speaking, his entire body flashed, and he pounced towards the 7 Taoists closest to him. His speed was so fast that the others did not have time to react. Even if they wanted to help, they would not be able to. Luckily, the 7 young Taoists were well trained. Almost instinctively, they moved their swords to their left hand and joined their right palms together. With the 7 of them, they managed to block his attack. Decades of experience had allowed Ouyang Feng to use his strength well. It was possible that he was even better than Song Qing-shu. His ordinary palm had the effect of turning something rotten into something magical. The forward push was extremely strong, but what was even more powerful was the pull behind it. The 7 Taoists used all their strength to block his push. Unexpectedly, there was a strong force that pulled them forward. The 7 of them could not stand still and fell to the ground. Although they immediately leapt up, their faces were covered in dust, and they were ashamed. The old bearded Taoist saw how powerful Ouyang Feng's attack was. In one move, 7 of his martial nephews had fallen to the ground. He could not help but be alarmed. He gave a long whistle and activated the 14 Big Dipper formations. He thought that even if the enemy's palm strength was 10 times stronger, it would still be difficult to push 98 people with just 2 hands. Ouyang Feng was surprised. He did not think that the opponent's formation would react so quickly. Also, he could see that its power was not to be underestimated. In the past, he had personally experienced the Big Dipper formation, but he had never seen this Big Dipper formation before. He guessed that Xiu Chuji and the others came up with it later. After Song Qingshu's warning, he thought that even if the Chuanjin 7 Masters personally used it, he would still be confident that he could easily break the formation. But now, there are 2 formations, one positive and one negative, with a total of 14 Big Dipper positions. How could he deal with them alone? Chapter 962. While he was hesitating, the enemy's formation had already surrounded him. Ouyang Feng snorted and separated his palms. Following the principle of capturing the leader first, he rushed towards the bearded Taoist. Who would have thought that the formation's secret was to lure the enemy to attack the commander? The smaller formations would then take the opportunity to attack from the east and west, from the south and from the north. The enemy would fall into a trap. Ouyang Feng had only run 7 or 8 steps when he felt the situation was not good. The pressure behind him increased, and the 2 sides were also attacking. He was about to turn to the right when the 2 small formations in front of him sent 14 swords stabbing towards him. The positions of these 14 swords were all grasped perfectly, leaving him with no room to dodge or evade. Song Qingshu's eyes flashed. It seemed that he had underestimated the Chuanjin sect. Although apart from Wang Chongyang and Zhou Batong, it would be difficult to find any other skilled fighters. Just by relying on this mysterious formation, they would be able to stand tall in Wulin. Ouyang Feng was the Western poison, so naturally he would not be affected by such a small amount of danger. He leaped forward, his right leg flew out, and his left hand stretched out, kicking one of the Taoists, and at the same time he snatched his sword. Seeing the 7 swords on his right waist, he waved his left hand, and the 8 swords collided with each other. A kala sound was heard, and the 7 swords were broken into 2 pieces. The sword in his hand was unharmed. The sword he snatched was no different from the other swords. It was not a particularly sharp sword, but he had used his internal energy to break the opponent's 7 swords. The 2 Big Dipper formations on the side immediately moved forward to protect him. Ouyang Feng saw that the 14 Taoists had used their left hands to support their Taoist companion's right shoulder. The 14 of them had combined their strength into one. He couldn't help but become arrogant. "You think I'm afraid of you?" He waved his sword and stuck it to the 14th Taoist sword. The Taoist tried to snatch it, but the sword in his hand seemed to be stuck to the anvil of a cauldron and did not move an inch. The other 13 Taoists circulated their internal energy and wanted to combine their strength to break the enemy's defense. Ouyang Feng felt the strength in his hand increase and laughed coldly. "Break!" His right arm shook and a kala sound was heard. It was as if he had pushed down a huge object. The 14 swords were all broken. The 14 Taoists spat out mouthfuls of blood and fell back into the formation. Their faces were filled with shock. Because of this, the Taoists were even more cautious and their attacks became more stable. Although the 21 Taoists had lost their weapons and were heavily injured, they could still move their palms like the wind, and their power did not decrease. Ouyang Feng could feel that the enemy's defense was becoming more and more solid, and he was very surprised. He did not know what new innovations Ma Yu and Xiao Chuji had made in the Big Dipper formation in the past few years, but even he felt that it was somewhat troublesome. As a matter of fact, he was the Grand Western poison. If he casually sprinkled some poisonous powder, vipers and the like, this formation would collapse on its own. However, he wanted to take this opportunity to understand the mystery of this formation, in case the Chuanjin 7 Masters were to activate it in the future. If by any chance some brilliant change occurred, he would not be able to disarm it in a hurry, and that would be too shameful. Therefore, from the beginning until now, he did not use any heavy hand. The long-bearded Taoist saw that he was gradually gaining the upper hand, and thought that Ouyang Feng's technique would stop here. He smiled coldly in his heart, and pushed the formation even more tightly. Ouyang Feng continued to observe for a while, and saw that the opponent was not holding back anything in the Big Dipper formation. He laughed evilly, and suddenly crouched down, and moved to the northeast corner. He saw the 2 small formations in the southwest following him like a shadow. His fingertips trembled, and in the blink of an eye he stabbed his sword 14 times. 14 cold stars flew out at the same time, and each sword pierced the Yonggu acupoint on the outside of a Taoist's right wrist. Song Qingshu secretly nodded his head. The Western poison Ouyang Feng was not known for his swordsmanship, but his martial arts had reached such a high level that he had already mastered 10,000 techniques. His sword moves just now were obviously the highest level of swordsmanship. The sword moves were like the wind, like lightning, but they did not miss the slightest bit. It was as if he had shot out 14 secret projectiles at the same time. The Taoists cried out in alarm, and then felt pain in their wrists. Their fingers lost their strength, and the 14 swords fell to the ground. Everyone was shocked and hurriedly leapt back. They looked at their wrists and saw that they were bleeding profusely. The tendons in their hands had probably been cut off. The long-bearded Taoist was enraged. "Your Excellency's methods are vicious." Ouyang Feng laughed coldly. "They really don't know what's good for them. I have already been merciful by not cutting off their hands." Song Qingshu laughed bitterly. He knew that Ouyang Feng was speaking the truth. He guessed that it was because of his previous orders that he didn't use too much force. After all, the tendons in their hands had been cut, and although they couldn't wield a sword, As long as they paid attention to their daily lives, they would be no different from a normal person. But Ouyang Feng had just injured their people, and to say such things to them would be too much of a mockery. As expected, the Taoists from Chongyang Palace were enraged, and the long-bearded Taoist didn't say a word. He immediately gave orders and tightened the formation. He thought that with 98 Taoists surrounding him, even if they squeezed him to death, if they didn't turn him into meat paste, how would they be able to avenge their comrades? Ouyang Feng didn't mind. His left palm slanted, and his right palm pushed out to the left. The 7 Taoists from the Big Dipper formation caught it. Ouyang Feng rushed to the North Star position, and the second Big Dipper formation followed. At this time, there were 14 Big Dipper formations and 14 North Star constellations. Ouyang Feng didn't have the ability to split himself, so he couldn't occupy all 14 positions at the same time. But he used his lightness kung fu, and as soon as he occupied the North Star position, he immediately moved to the second formation's North Star position. He did this a few times, and his movements were fast. To the people watching, it was as if there were 14 Ouyang Fengs. Very quickly, the Big Dipper formation started to show signs of chaos. The long-bearded Taoist saw that the situation wasn't good, and quickly gave orders for the Taoists to scatter far away, stand firm, and wait. He knew that if everyone followed the opponent's movements would be fast, and they would be able to disrupt the formation. But if they stood firm and did not move, the 14 North Star positions would be far away from each other. No matter how fast the opponent's movements were, it would be difficult for them to occupy all the positions at the same time. Qiu Qianren, who was at the side, couldn't help but exclaim, "Chongyang Palace really has a deep foundation. Any random 4th-generation disciple is so proficient in formations, and his reactions are so fast. Young master, since these Taoists are not moving, why don't we take this opportunity to go to Chongyang Palace?" Song Qingshu nodded his head. "That's a good idea. Brother Feng, I'll have to trouble you here." Ouyang Feng replied coldly, "Brother, you go first, I'll be right there." Hearing that these people didn't even put them in their eyes, the group of Taoists were enraged. The long-bearded Taoist coldly laughed, a toad yawning. What a big tone. Ouyang Feng's eyes flashed with murderous intent, so the opponent had unintentionally offended him. His famous technique was the toad stance, so sometimes Hong Qigong, Zhou Batong, and Huang Rong would call him a stinky toad. These people were fine. They had all known each other for a while, so they could be considered acquaintances. But this Taoist in front of him was only a 4th-generation disciple of Chongyang Palace. Who did he think he was? Ouyang Feng's face sank, and he squatted on the ground with his hands bent to his shoulders. His throat emitted a gurgling sound, and his stomach expanded and contracted. His entire body was like a giant toad that was about to pounce. Song Qingshu sighed. To think that Brother Feng would be so angry. These Taoists can only pray for their own good. Chapter 963. It must be known that Ouyang Feng's havoc in Chongyang Palace was something that happened 10 to 20 years ago. The 3rd-generation disciples that saw him in action were few and far between, let alone these Taoists. Although the long-bearded Taoist didn't recognize the toad stance, he could clearly feel the opponent's aura becoming stronger and stronger. That terrifying pressure was becoming stronger and stronger. He quickly called out, "Don't let him continue accumulating power." Everyone attacked together and interrupt him. The Taoists all responded, so the left side of the Big Dipper formation attacked Ouyang Feng's left side. The right side of the Big Dipper formation attacked Ouyang Feng's right side, trying to use the 98 people's combined strength to defeat the opponent. Ouyang Feng sneered again and again in his heart. The toad stance's greatest characteristic is that it uses stillness to counter attacks. The whole body accumulates strength without releasing it. As long as the enemy attacks, there will immediately be an incomparably ferocious counterattack. If they don't know the severity of their attacks, they will simply be courting death. Seeing the 49 Taoists on the left and the 49 Taoists on the right charging towards Ouyang Feng, Ouyang Feng kicked the ground with both his legs and a loud pung sound was heard as the two forces collided with each other. The Taoists in the formation either had their arms broken or spat out blood as they fell to the ground. The long, bearded Taoist who was in charge of the formation reacted quickly and stopped the 30 or so people. Although they didn't end up like their companions, they were still battered and exhausted. Before, he thought that Chongyang Palace was invincible because of the Big Dipper formation, but now he knew that there was always someone better than him in this world. He knew that the opponent wasn't someone they could defeat, so he quickly reorganized the formation and retreated up the mountain, planning to first notify the martial uncles and martial uncles, and then combine the strength of the entire sect to save his injured companions. Ouyang Feng was proud of his status and didn't bother chasing them. Song Qingshu's group walked to the edge of the Washing Sword Pond and saw the 30 or so Taoists rushing in their direction. Song Qingshu couldn't help but frown. If he let these people go back and report the situation, Chongyang Palace has a lot of disciples. When the time comes, they will set up tens of these Big Dipper formations, and it will be very troublesome. But seeing the water next to him, Song Qingshu extended his hand and pressed down. Immediately, a curtain of water appeared, and with a wave of his sleeve, the water droplets were like hidden weapons and shot towards the disciples that were chasing after him. Waves of cries of alarm sounded out, and the remaining 30 or so Taoists all fell to the ground. Song Qingshu's control of strength was very good. He had only sealed those people's acupoints, so they did not suffer any serious injuries. Qiu Qianren and Tadish were still fine with it since they already knew of Song Qingshu's prowess in martial arts. Instead, Pucha Qiucao's eyes were almost popping out of their sockets. Even though her brother had mentioned his prowess in martial arts, it wasn't a glorious matter for Pucha Qiucao to be defeated by Song Qingshu. Hence, she couldn't help but misunderstand that her brother was defeated by Song Qingshu. But now that she had seen Song Qingshu effortlessly subdue the 30 or so experts of Chongyang Palace, how could she not be shocked? Previously, she had personally experienced the prowess of the Big Dipper formation, but now, Song Qingshu, with just a wave of his hand, defeated an enemy that was several times more than the one she had just faced. Song Qingshu did not pay attention to the shock that his actions had caused to the young lady beside him. He smiled and said to the people beside him, "Let's go." Tadish lightly laughed, and with a tap of her toes, in a few leaps, she had already traveled over 100 feet. Only then did Pucha Qiucao react, and with a cry of alarm, she hastily chased after them. Even though she knew that the chances were slim, with her personality, she was not one to easily admit defeat. Clenching her teeth, she chased after them. When Song Qingshu and the others reached the top of the mountain, they saw that Tadish had a pleased expression on her face, and Pucha Qiucao had a dejected expression. Naturally, they knew who had won and who had lost. Someone won't go back on his word after losing, right? Tadish's lips curled into a proud smile, deliberately provoking them. I will do what I say. Naturally, I won't go back on my word. Isn't it just being a servant? Pucha Qiucao hated the other party to death. Her martial arts were obviously high, but she had to pretend to be a weak, foxy woman, causing her to mistakenly think that the other party was only using her looks to please others. Who would have thought that she was pretending to be a pig to eat a tiger? Song Qingshu could not help but laugh. All right. Everyone is just playing a little game to liven up the atmosphere. There's no need to be so serious. Before Tadish could speak, Pucha Qiucao spoke first. No, although I'm a woman, I know the principle of keeping my word. A loss is a loss. Song Qingshu felt a headache coming on. Then how about this? Your bet will be based on this mission, and will be automatically canceled when you return to the capital. How about it? Pucha Qiucao was, after all, the eldest daughter of the Pucha family. If the news of her becoming a servant girl for her own concubine were to spread back to the capital, Pucha and Ahu would not look good. Currently, both parties were in the honeymoon phase of their relationship. There was no need to cause a rift over such a small matter. Pucha Qiucao was just a little embarrassed. She did not really want to be Tadish's servant girl for the rest of her life. Now that there was a way out, there was no reason for her to reject. She could not help but look gratefully at Song Qing-shu, suddenly feeling that this person was not as loathsome as before. Sure, I have no objections. Tadish squinted her eyes, smiling like a fox. In any case, her plan could only be put to good use outside. It would be impossible to carry it out once they returned to the capital. Song Qing-shu nodded, seeing a grand hall not far away. He could faintly hear the sound of flutes being blown, mixed with the sound of copper bells and leather drums rumbling. It was obvious that some grand ceremony was being held. At this time, the inauguration ceremony was already halfway through. Yin Jiping first went to the Hall of Three Pristines to kowtow to Yuanshi Tianzun, Taishang Daojun, and Taishang Laojun, the Three Pristines. He then went to the rear hall to kowtow to the portrait of the founder Wang Chongyang, before going to the third hall, where the Chuanjin 7 disciples gathered and kowtowed to the 7 empty chairs, before returning to the main hall, the Hall of Three Pristines. Qiu Chuji's second disciple, Li Jichang, took out the immortal sect's decree and read it out, ordering Yin Jiping to take over as the sect leader. Yin Jiping knelt down to listen to the lecture. Thinking of how he had once harbored such thoughts toward Xiaolong Nu, he immediately felt a mixture of guilt. After listening to the lecture, Yin Jiping stood up and was about to say a few humble words to the Taoists when he suddenly heard a loud and clear voice coming from the entrance of the hall. The imperial edict of His Majesty of the Great Jin Kingdom has arrived, conferring the title of the Chuanjin sect leader. The Taoists turned their heads and saw a handsome young man standing at the entrance of the hall, with 2 beautiful girls standing on either side of him. Especially the girl in purple. She had bright eyes, snow-white skin, phoenix eyebrows, and cheeks as translucent as jade. The sunlight faintly shone through her dress, making her look incomparably beautiful. The crowd of Taoists turned their heads and saw a handsome young man standing at the entrance of the hall, with 2 beautiful girls standing on either side of him. Especially the girl in purple. She had bright eyes, snow-white skin, phoenix eyebrows, and cheeks as translucent as jade. The sunlight faintly shone through her dress, making her look incomparably beautiful. Some of the younger disciples in the hall were even more unbearable. When they saw Tash's appearance, their hearts began to beat faster and their mouths became dry. For the first time, some of them even began to waver in their belief in Taoism. They thought that if they could get intimate with her, not to mention becoming the sect leader, even attaining Taoism and ascending to heaven would no longer be attractive. Including the 2 chapters from the past 2 days, he still owed 12 chapters. Application method for Zongheng genuine readers to enter the VIP group. First, you need to have Young Hero fan points and above, then add Q. Chapter 964. Noticing that the gazes of all the Taoist priests in the Grand Hall were fixated on Tajkis, Ouyang Feng snorted coldly and said, Wang Chongyang's disciples and grand disciples are getting worse with each generation. They should be cultivating to become immortals, but in the end, they are all lustful people. Yin Jiping's face turned red, and he couldn't help but think of Xiaolong Nu's peerless beauty. He thought, if she smiled at me, I wouldn't need to cultivate to become immortals. The other disciples couldn't help but become angry and angrily shouted, Audacious disciple, you dare to insult Founder Chongyang. Yin Jiping finally saw Ouyang Feng's face and was shocked. He blurted out, Western poison Ouyang Feng. He had personally seen Ouyang Feng wreak havoc in Chongyang Palace. How could he not recognize this demon? Hearing his words, the hall was filled with gasps. Although many of them had not seen West Poison with their own eyes, they all knew that he was as famous as Grandmaster Chongyang. Therefore, no one dared to speak arrogantly, especially when they thought about how Ouyang Feng had always been at odds with Chongyang Palace. It would be difficult to settle this peacefully. Song Qing-shu smiled and stepped forward, saying, Don't be nervous, Taoist masters. Today, we are here on behalf of the imperial court of the Jin Kingdom to confer titles to your cult, not to make trouble. Then, he winked at Qiu Qianren. Xiao Qianren nodded and walked forward. He stood in the middle of the hall and took out a yellow scroll. He opened it with both hands and read. The title of the Chuanjin sect leader is Immortal Tao Grandmaster, Xinmin sect leader, Enlightened Master, in charge of all Taoists. As the main hall of the Chuanjin sect, the entire hall was extremely spacious and could even accommodate hundreds of people at the same time. However, in such a large space, Xiao Qianren didn't seem to use much strength, but his voice spread to every corner of the hall. Everyone could hear him clearly. Based on this profound skill alone, there were probably not many people in the hall who could compare to him. Among the third-generation disciples, some of the more senior ones looked at each other. They had already recognized that this ordinary-looking old man was the famous Iron Palm, Shui Shangpiao. They immediately became worried. If Ouyang Feng and Xiao Qianren joined hands, who in the entire Chongyang sect could stop them? Among the third-generation disciples, Song Defeng had always been quick-witted. Seeing that the situation was not good, he quietly slipped out of the hall, intending to inform Qiao Chuji and the others who were in the Jade Void Cave. Because there were too many Taoists in the hall with the cover of his companions, no one noticed his movements. At this point, Xiao Qianren had almost finished reading the edict. Seeing that no one was kneeling down to listen to the edict, he loudly said, "Chuanjin sect leader, please receive the edict." Since things had come to this, Yin Jiping had no choice but to step forward and bow, saying, "Our sect master Qianren is in seclusion, and now I'm taking over as the new sect master. The Jin Emperor's edict is not for me. I dare not accept it." Xiao Qianren said with a smile that was not a smile. The title was not meant to be given to Reverend Xiao. Whoever is the leader of the Chuanjin sect will receive the title. Yin Jiping said, "I have no virtue and no ability. I really do not dare to accept it." Xiao Qianren's smile became even more strange. No need to be polite. Quickly accept the edict. He had been in Jianghu for so many years. How could he not know the relationship between Wang Chongyang and the Jin Kingdom? As the disciples of Wang Chongyang, how could these Taoists accept the edict of the Jin Kingdom? Wasn't that the same as betraying their master and destroying their ancestors? In reality, he was hoping that the Taoists of the Chongyang sect would refuse, then he would have a reason to kill them. There were still 3,000 elite soldiers at the bottom of the mountain. Once they received the signal, they would come up the mountain and erase the Chongyang sect from Jianghu. Yin Jiping was anxious, but he was after all the most outstanding person in the third generation. He quickly thought of a way to deal with this, and that was to delay. The honor has suddenly fallen, and I have not expected it. Please come to the back of the hall to serve tea. I will discuss this with my apprentice brothers. Xiao Qianren immediately laughed coldly. I don't know what is there to discuss. Song Qing-shu smiled faintly. Since they want to discuss, then let them discuss it properly and weigh the pros and cons clearly. However, I would like to remind all the Taoist masters that the discussion shouldn't take too long. We still have 3,000 elite troops at the foot of the mountain. If it takes too long, they might get hungry and come up the mountain to ask for some rice, noodles, vegetables, and the like from your esteemed cult. His tone was calm, but the threat was evident in his words, causing the Taoists in the hall to change color. Of course, I won't let you wait for too long. Yin Jiping forced a smile and immediately sent 4 Taoists in charge of receiving guests to invite them to the back of the hall for tea. Song Qing-shu was secretly pleased, so it felt so good to use one's power to oppress others. No wonder the protagonists in the novels of his previous world wanted to be a playboy and bully others. The group arrived at the back of the hall, and just as they sat down, Tashkis coughed lightly and looked at Pu Cha Xiao Chao with a smile that was not a smile. "Miss Xiao Chao, since you have agreed to be my servant, why aren't you coming to serve tea?" "You." Pu Cha Xiao Chao fiercely glared at her, but in the end, she bit her lips and received the tea from the Taoist and brought it to Tashkis. "Here, your tea." Tashkis shook her head. "Is this the attitude a servant should have? You don't even know how to say please?" Pu Cha Xiao Chao's chest rose and fell rapidly. Just when Song Qing-shu thought she was going to turn hostile, She calmed her emotions and lightly said, "Please, madam, have some tea." "That's more like it." Tajkis smiled in satisfaction, but she did not reach out to receive the tea. Instead, she pouted her lips at Song Qing-shu. "Serve young master's tea first." Pu Cha Chiu Chow was so angry that she almost splashed the tea in her hand at her face. But she quickly remembered that if not for Song Qing-shu's help, she would have to be a servant for the rest of her life. Since that was the case, it was only right for her to serve him a cup of tea. With this in mind, Pu Cha Chiu Chow immediately calmed down and brought the tea in front of Song Qing-shu. "Young master, please have some tea." Tajkis's teasing voice sounded again. "Shouldn't a servant kneel when serving tea to the master?" Pu Cha Chiu Chow could no longer endure and angrily retorted, "Tajkis, don't go overboard." After traveling for so long, she naturally knew the other party's name. However, she was not a member of the pugilistic world, so she did not know that Tajkis was the purple dragon queen of yesteryear. Moreover, even if she was a member of the pugilistic world, other than a few members of the Ming dynasty, it would be difficult for others to associate Tajkis with the purple dragon queen. Tajkis did not get angry, but smilingly said, "Actually, if you were to declare in front of the entire army that you are a person who goes back on his words, you would no longer need to be a servant." Chapter 965. Pu Cha Chiu Cao had never hated a person so much, especially a woman. She laughed coldly in her heart. She is just a concubine of the prince consort, a woman who cannot see the light of day. The source of Tang Quobian's power is his princess wife. Once we get back to the capital, I'll tell the imperial family what happened along the way, and let the emperor and princess know that their beloved son-in-law has a mistress outside. I don't believe Tang Quobian can still protect you. With this thought in mind, Pu Cha Chiu Cao felt much better. She went to Song Qing-shu and knelt down, calmly saying, "Young master, please have some tea." Song Qing-shu felt a headache coming on. Tajkis had humiliated Pu Cha Chiu Cao in such a manner. How could she let it go? But Tajkis had always been a proud and willful person. He wanted to completely subdue her, and it was not good to scold her when she was having fun. Comparing the two, Tajkis was more important. After all, Pu Cha Chiu Cao was only the eldest daughter of the Pu Cha family and could not fully represent the interests of the family. Therefore, although Song Qing-shu hesitated for a while, he still accepted the tea from Pu Cha Chiu Cao. Of course, to ease the atmosphere, he pretended to help her up and said, "Miss Chiu Cao, please rise." Pu Cha Chiu Cao silently stood up, biting her lips without replying. Just like that, she stood at the side with a solemn face. Tajkis had vented her anger and stood at the side contentedly, no longer being overbearing. At this time, Yin Jiping invited the 16 senior disciples to sit down in the courtyard and were discussing countermeasures. "This is a serious matter. I dare not make the decision on my own. I will have to listen to the opinions of my senior brothers." Li Zichong shook his head. "The Jin invaded our land and harmed our people. How can we accept their edict? Although the Central Plains have been ruled by the Jin for many years, Li Zichong still considered himself a Song citizen." Zhang Zhiguang said, "Mount Zhongnan is under Mongolian control, and our monastery is also within Mongolian territory. If we refuse the edict, the Chuanjin sect will be in big trouble." Among the Chuanjin 7 masters, Qiu Chuji's martial arts were the highest. In addition, he had a fiery temper and many disciples, so his branch was the strongest in the Chuanjin sect. However, where there were people, there would be Jianghu. The third-generation disciples were not united, and many of the other disciples were not close to Qiu Chuji's faction. They usually surrounded Zhao Zhijing, and the two factions could be said to be evenly matched, standing on equal footing. Now that Zhao Zhijing had been killed outside, Zhang Zhiguang was second only to Zhao Zhijing in terms of both martial arts and prestige. Therefore, he was naturally pushed to be the new leader of the small group. They had always been at odds with Yin Jiping, so naturally, they would come out to oppose him with such a good opportunity. Of course, this didn't necessarily mean that Zhang Zhiguang was willing to accept the conferment, but Yin Jiping and the others were obviously against the conferment, and Zhang Zhiguang was the spokesperson of the anti-Yin Jiping faction. If he went along with them, wouldn't he lose the capital to settle down? More importantly, as long as the Chuanjin sect accepted the title according to his opinion, his prestige would immediately surpass Yin Jiping's. Whether it was a battle of viewpoints or a battle of routes, they were all meaningless. In the end, it was just a battle of power. Li Zichang said, "Senior Brother Zhang's words are wrong." Zhang Zhiguang raised his voice and said, "What is wrong? Senior Brother Li, please tell me." Li Zichang said, "I don't dare to tell you. But Senior Brother Zhang, who is our founder, Chongyang Zhenren? Who are you and my master, the Chuanjin 7 Masters?" Zhang Zhiguang was stunned. Our founder and master were protectors of Hongdao, and they were masters of the Sanqing sect. Li Zichang said, "They are all men of indomitable spirit, love their country, and care for the people. Each of them risked their lives and fought against the Jin army." Zhang Zhiguang naturally did not dare to deny. Yes, Chongyang Zhenren and the Chuanjin 7 Masters are famous in Jianghu, who in the martial world does not admire them. Li Zichang said, "Thinking of our sect's previous generation of Zhenren, all of them were not afraid of strong, and were determined to save the people from disaster. Even if the Chuanjin sect is in trouble, what are we afraid of? We can cut off our heads, but not our will." These words were full of righteousness, and Yin Jiping and more than 10 senior disciples were moved. Zhang Zhiguang laughed coldly. "Only Senior Brother Li is not afraid of death, and everyone else is afraid of death? It was difficult for our founder to start the sect. How much effort did our founder and the 7 Masters put in to get the sect to where it is today? If we do not handle it properly and destroy the Chuanjin sect, how can we face our founder in the underworld? When the 5 Masters come out, how are we going to explain it?" His words made sense, and a few other Taoists agreed with him. Zhang Zhiguang continued, "As the saying goes, there are no eternal friends, and there are no eternal enemies. It is true that the Jin are our archenemy, but the situation is different now. The Mongols are like the sun in the sky, invading Sichuan, Xiangyang, and other places of the Song. In recent years, the Jin stopped the war with the Song, and at the same time, helped the Song to block most of the Mongols. We accept the Jin's edict, and, to a certain extent, we are also helping the Song." His words were very reasonable. Now, even the Taoists who had always been neutral started to waver. Qiu Chuji's other disciple, Wang Jitan, saw that the situation was not good and hurriedly said, "Even though the Jin stopped the war with the Song on the surface, they still covet the Song's territory. Moreover, if the Mongols force the Jin into a corner and the Jin can no longer hold out, they will go south to take the Song's territory to make up for their losses. The Song's territory will be in danger. You and I are both citizens of the Song. How can we accept the enemy's edict?" He turned to Yin Jiping and said, "Senior brother, if you accept the edict, you will be a traitor and our sect's eternal sinner. I, Wang Jitan, will not let this matter rest, even if the blood from my neck splatters on the ground." At this point, his voice was stern. Zhang Zhiguang suddenly stood up and slapped the table, shouting, "Junior Brother Wang, are you going to use force? How dare you be so rude to the Reverend?" Wang Jitan said sternly, "We are just reasoning. If we want to use force, why will we be afraid of you?" This situation was quite interesting. People who were against Yin Jiping were standing up for Yin Jiping. If people who did not know the truth saw this, they would definitely confuse the positions of both sides. Seeing that both sides had their own arguments, and neither side had the upper hand, they were about to swing their fists and draw their swords to fight. A white-haired Taoist waved his hand and said, "Junior brothers, let's talk this out. There is no need to be so angry." Wang Jitan said, "Senior brother, what do you think we should do?" The Taoist said, "In my opinion, a monk should be compassionate. If we can save one more person, it will be a sign of heaven's benevolence. If we are appointed by the Jin Emperor, we can try our best to dissuade the Jin Emperor, his ministers, and his soldiers from killing indiscriminately. We can also use the power of the Jin to deal with the Mongols and give the song a chance to recover. Chapter 966. Yin Jiping's faction became anxious when they saw that they had the upper hand. Li Jichong hurriedly stood up and said, "Senior brother, you're wrong." Zhang Zhiguang glared at him and said, "Senior brother, you're a man of virtue and prestige. What's wrong?" His words were obviously against his will. The white-haired Taoist was just the oldest, so everyone gave him face on the surface. In reality, everyone knew that he was pedantic, so no one paid any attention to him. Li Jichong naturally knew that Zhang Zhiguang was using someone else to do his dirty work. But now, he could only argue and offend his senior brother. "Senior brother, you said that monks should be merciful. If we can save more people, it's a sign of heaven's benevolence. I agree with you. But senior brother mentioned that if we accept the Jin Emperor's edict, we could try our best to dissuade the Jin Emperor and his soldiers from killing indiscriminately. I don't agree with you." Angle. V. Male Sino. Junior brother. What do you want? The white-haired Taoist asked hesitantly. He had a good temper and did not seem to be angry. Li Jichong said, "Everyone knows that the current Jin Emperor, Wanyan Shi, is temperamental. He often orders the death of ministers and ministers. In the past 2 years, dozens of high-ranking officials have been executed for no reason. He doesn't even care about the lives of the Jurchen nobles. Why would he care about the lives of ordinary people just because we dissuade him?" Most of the people present were cultivators and did not know much about the situation in the court. Hearing his words, there was a lot of discussion. Li Jichong continued, "What's more, when senior brother Zhang mentioned the truce between the Jin Kingdom and the Southern Song Dynasty, I also have a different opinion." Zhang Zhiguang had just been counterattacked by him. Before he could react, Li Jichong pressed on. He suddenly felt something was wrong and asked in a low voice, "How can the Jin Kingdom and the Song Dynasty be false?" The reason why the Jin Kingdom and the Song Dynasty stopped fighting was that the Mongols were pressuring them. Now that the Mongols are marching westward, the Jin Kingdom has a chance to breathe and may not stop fighting. Li Jichong continued, "The Jin Kingdom is afraid of the Mongols. In their eyes, the Song Dynasty is an easier target to conquer. This time, they're taking advantage of the Mongols' westward expedition to take the Song Dynasty's land to make up for their losses." Zhang Zhiguang sneered. "This is just a rumor. It's not credible." "Really?" Li Jichong seemed to have expected his reaction and answered, "But Guojing and Huangrong were ambushed by the Jins in Kaifeng Prefecture not long ago. They are the backbone of Xianyang City. As long as they are eliminated, it will be easier to conquer Xianyang. The Jins are ambitious." Zhang Zhiguang shook his head and said, "At the end of the day, this is just your personal guess. Why do you have to be alarmist here?" Li Jichong exclaimed, "Good. So you were ordered by the Jin Emperor to be a spy." Zhang Zhiguang was startled at first. Then he became furious and shouted, "What did you say?" Li Jichong said, "Whoever speaks for the Jin is a traitor." Zhang Zhiguang suddenly leaped up and struck Li Jichong's head with his palm. 2 palms pierced out from the side, simultaneously parrying his attack. The ones who attacked were 2 of Qiu Chuji's other disciples, one of whom was Qi Jiqing. Zhang Zhiguang became even angrier and shouted, "Good. Uncle Qiu has many disciples. Do you want to bully others?" Yin Jiping clapped his hands and said, "Fellow apprentice brothers, please sit down and listen to what I have to say." The leader of the Chuanjin sect had always been very powerful. The Taoists all sat down and didn't dare to argue any further. The white-bearded Taoist on the other side said, "Yes, let's listen to the headmaster's orders. If he says to accept the title, then accept it. If not, then don't. The Khan is giving the title to him, not us. What's there to argue about?" Although Zhang Zhiguang was indignant, the neutral faction had spoken, and he could not offend them. He could only listen to what Yin Jiping had to say. Li Jichong, Wang Jitan, and the others knew that Yin Jiping was a loyal and righteous person. They thought that with his words, There was no need to argue. So they looked at Yin Jiping and waited for his decision. Yin Jiping said slowly, I have no virtue and no ability. I did not expect to encounter such a big event on my first day. He looked up and was lost in thought. The gazes of the 16 senior disciples were all focused on him. The Tao Academy was so quiet that not a single sound could be heard. After a long time, Yin Jiping said slowly, the sect was founded by Master Chongyang and was developed by Master Ma, Master Lu, and Master Chiu. I have become the headmaster. How can I disobey the teachings of Wang, Ma, Lu, and Chiu? Brothers, the Mongolian army is attacking Xiangyang from the south, invading our land and killing our people. If the 4 headmasters were here, would they accept the title or not? When the Taoists heard this, they thought about how Tu Chongyang, Ma Yu, Lu Chuxian, and Xiu Chuji usually did things. Wang Chongyang had passed away a long time ago. The 3rd-generation disciples had never seen him. Ma Yu was modest and honest. He handled matters calmly and did not do anything. Lu Chuxian was very shrewd. It was difficult for the disciples to guess his intentions. But Xiu Chuji's character was like a raging fire. He was loyal and righteous. When they thought of him, they all said in unison, Headmaster Chiu will definitely not accept it. Zhang Zhiguang frowned and said loudly, You are the headmaster now, not Uncle Chiu. Yin Jiping said, I am mediocre and do not dare to disobey your teachings. Besides, I have sinned so much that even death cannot wipe out my crimes. At this point, he lowered his head and did not speak. Now that Zhao Zhijing was dead, the Taoists did not know the meaning of his words. They did not know that he was mad with guilt for his despicable act of drugging Xiao Longnu and had long been disheartened. They all thought that he was just being humble. They only felt that the words sinful and deserve to die were too heavy and a little out of place. Zhang Zhiguang snorted and stood up. He said, So, Headmaster has decided not to accept it? But has Headmaster thought about what to do with the 3,000 Jin soldiers at the foot of the mountain? Yin Jiping said sadly, My life is not to be regretted, but our sect's reputation cannot be tarnished. His voice gradually became impassioned, and he said, Today's heroes are sworn to fight against foreign invaders. The Chuanjin sect is known as the orthodox sect of martial arts. If we surrender to the Jin, how can we face the heroes of the world? The Taoists cheered. Li Jichang, Wang Jitan, and Qi Jiqing said loudly, Headmaster Brother's words make sense. Zhang Zhiguang and the others immediately lost face. But Yin Jiping was the headmaster, and Xiu Chuji's faction was powerful. Now that they had the support of the neutral faction, they could not oppose it even if they wanted to. Yin Jiping stood in the middle and ordered his brothers to stand guard beside him. He also sent someone to fetch weapons for emergencies. Then he said, Invite the Jin's messenger. Chapter 9:67. Yin Jiping replied, The Jin and the Great Song are now enemies. How can we, the people of the Great Song, accept the title of the Jin? Please return. When we meet again on the battlefield, we will meet again. These words were said very happily. Many of the Taoists in the hall cheered loudly. Chongyang Palace's reaction was within Song Qingshu's expectations. The reason why he gave them time to discuss was because he wanted to stall for time for the guards to come up the mountain. The second reason was because he wanted to see if there would be internal strife like in the original work. If that happened, he would save himself a lot of trouble. It was a pity that the current situation did not seem to be developing in an ideal way. It seemed that he had underestimated Zhao Zhijing. Only he had the ability to overturn the seas and rivers. Once he died, Chongyang Palace became a solid block. However, Song Qingshu did not regret killing Zhao Zhijing for Xiao Longnu back then. After all, he could make a beauty smile. It was just Zhao Zhijing, so killing him was not a big deal. Taoist words are wrong. Chongyang Palace is now within the borders of the Jin. Of course you're the people of the Jin. How can you be the people of the Great Song? Pucha Qiu Chao stepped forward and said. Yin Jiping replied lightly, Guangong's heart is in the Jin camp. Though we dare not compare ourselves to Guangong, we still have this bit of ambition. As if to support his words, the surrounding Taoists all raised their swords and surrounded Pucha, Qiu Chao, and the others. Song Qingshu listened and nodded his head. This Yin Jiping was quite a character. Actually, in the original book, other than his unforgivable crime of sullying Xiaolong Nu, he was a top character in all other aspects. In this world, because of the butterfly effect, Yin Jiping was instigated by Zhao Zijing to drug Xiaolong Nu, but he did not succeed, so Song Qingshu saw him in a much better light. Pucha Qiu Chao's blade was in front of him, but he showed no fear. He laughed coldly and said, "You all acted rashly today. You don't know what's good for you. The great foundation of the Chuanjin sect will be destroyed. What a pity, what a pity." Yin Jiping said, "The mountains and rivers of the divine prefecture are already in ruins. What can we, a mere sect, do? If Miss doesn't leave quickly and someone is rude, I might not be able to restrain them." Qiu Qianren had long lost his patience and suddenly interrupted coldly. "How rude? This old man wants to see." He had been relying on Song Qingshu for so long, but he had not made any progress. His sense of crisis was getting stronger and stronger. Last time, he finally had a chance to capture the assassin who had escaped, but who knew that the assassin would be Yang Miaojin, who was invincible in the martial arts world in the Central Plains with her pear blossom spear. Not only did he not manage to capture the assassin, but he was also nearly captured by the people who were lying in ambush, causing him to lose face. There was no way he would let go of such a good chance to render a meritorious service this time. As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly stretched out his long arm and attacked Yin Jiping. He had already seen clearly that Yin Jiping was the core of the Chuanjin sect. As long as he captured him, the Chuanjin sect would have half of their control. Yin Jiping was surrounded by Qiu Chuji's fellow disciples. Seeing this, Wang Jitan and Qi Jiqing hurriedly raised their swords. Qiu Qianren sneered, grabbed left and right, snatched the swords from Wang Jitan's and Song Dafang's hands, and with a schwa sound, the sword in his right hand stabbed towards Li Jichang. Li Jichang raised his sword to block, but felt his arm go slightly numb. He quickly circulated his internal energy to resist, and with a clang sound, the sword in his hand broke into two. Qiu Qianren snatched the sword, shook it, and was extremely fast. It only took a moment, and then with a wave of his sleeve, both palms struck out, knocking away the swords of the 4 senior Chuanjin disciples who came to help. With 3 moves, he defeated 7 of the Chuanjin sect's masters. The hundreds of Taoists in the hall were all aghast. They could not tell that this ordinary old man's martial arts were so high. But at this time, Yin Jiping had already raised his sword to attack. This move, the Great River Flows East, was one of the most powerful moves in Chuanjin swordplay. The blade cut through the air, making a chi-chi sound, and headed straight for Qiu Qianren's chest. Qiu Qianren's eyebrows twitched, and the sword in his left hand met it. When the swords met, the 2 swords immediately broke into 4 pieces. In the blink of an eye, Qiu Qianren had defeated 7 of the Chuanjin sect's masters, and the movement of his internal energy was difficult to avoid. But Yin Jiping's timing was very good, and so they were evenly matched. Qiu Qianren was slightly startled and couldn't help but praise, "Qiu Chuji has found a good disciple." He wanted to go forward again, but Li Jichang and Wang Jitan had already exchanged swords from their companions and called the other 5 senior disciples to form the Big Dipper formation and immediately surrounded him. Although Qiu Qianren's martial arts were strong, once this formation was activated, its power was extraordinary. Moreover, the 7 senior disciples' internal energy was not comparable to the 4th or 5th generation disciples on the mountainside, so naturally it would not be easy for Qiu Qianren to occupy the position of the Big Dipper star. He saw the formation change, and the 7 Chuanjin Taoists weaved left and right, and couldn't help but be confused. Pu Cha and Qiu Chao had already retreated to a corner of the hall. Seeing that the situation was not right, without waiting for Song Qingshu's consent, he quickly took out a horn and blew it. 2 Taoists rushed forward, wanting to snatch the horn, but Song Qingshu waved his hand and casually blocked them. The sound of the horn was quickly heard. Yin Jiping knew that he was calling for reinforcements and couldn't help but be roused. He called out, "Brother Yu Daoxian, Brother Wang Zhijin, take 3 other brothers and quickly go to the Jade Void Cave at the back of the mountain to help Brother Sun guard it, to prevent outside enemies from disturbing the 5 Masters' meditation. Brother Chunzi, take 6 people to guard the front of the mountain. Brother Fong Zhiqi, take 6 people to the left mountain. Brother Lu Downing, take 6 people to the right mountain." The ones guarding the front, back, left, and right were Qiu Chuji's disciples. Yu Daoxian, who was guarding the Jade Void Cave, was a disciple of Lu Chuxian, and Wang Zhijin was a disciple of Hao Datong. Lu Chuxian and Hao Datong were both meditating in the Jade Void Cave, and Yu Daoxian and Wang Zhijin's martial arts are high, and they were upright people. Even if they had ulterior motives, they would not harm their masters. In a short while, Yin Jiping had arranged everything in an orderly manner, and all the important places were guarded. Moreover, they were able to coordinate with each other, and even if a large number of troops came, it would be difficult to attack in a short time. The disciples saw that his eyes were like lightning, and that he was calm in giving orders. There was a sense of dignity in his orders, and no one dared to disobey him, and they all accepted their orders and left. Song Qingshu didn't mind and laughed, and let Yin Jiping do as he pleased. Anyways, along the way up the mountain, they had already destroyed the defenses, and the dozens of bodyguards that accompanied them were guarding the mountain. How could it be easy for the Chongyang Palace Taoists to take them back? The 3,000 troops would be able to attack the mountain in no time. But he didn't want to destroy the people. If he could settle everything before the Jin army arrived, that would be the best. With a casual movement, everyone in the hall felt their vision blur, and Song Qingshu was already standing by Yin Jiping's side. Yin Jiping turned pale with fright, and just as he was about to draw his sword to protect himself, his opponent's hand pressed down on his shoulder, and he couldn't summon any qi. Chuanjin sect's people, listen up. If you don't put down your weapons, your sect leader will immediately lose his life. Song Qingshu said in a deep voice. Suddenly, he heard a woman's cold voice say, "Wait, you're not allowed to attack. Let me kill this person." Today, he went to a forum to search for the book's comments, and saw that a certain pirated reader was coldly scolding the book, and at the same time telling others not to read the book, and immediately felt a bit stifled. It's normal for some readers not to like the book. After all, everyone has different tastes. But the public has hundreds of thousands of words, and it's enough to judge whether or not they like it. And if they don't like it, they can just give up. If it's an original reader, if they have any opinions about the book, I will humbly accept them and try to correct them. But some people read pirated copies and then go around slandering the book. Isn't that a bit too much? They say, my RMB is only used to support the author I like. If you don't like the book, no one is forcing you to read it. You've already read millions of words, and when you're accused of reading pirated copies, you say you don't like it at all, and even look down on those who read the original. Since I've already said this, there are some things that I can't not say. This book has been written for more than 2 years, and old readers should know that besides last month, I haven't asked for monthly votes, and I haven't said anything about the original or pirated copies. I've always adhered to the principle of those who have the money to support the book, and those who don't have the money to support the book. But how many people know the bitterness of this period? From the beginning of the book's publication in June 2014, the royalties for June were 138, July 1068, August 544, September 654, October 132, November 198. After that, the royalties averaged around 500 each month. It wasn't until April of this year that the entire internet started cracking down on piracy, and Vertical's traffic increased. Only then did the results of my book slowly improve. I received a very good recommendation in the past 2 months, and the results of my book rose again. Originally, writing books was just a hobby, and the investment and returns were not proportional, so I didn't really care. Until one day, when I was chatting with a reader of this book, he complained that I was updating too slowly, and went to Chidian to write a novel with a similar theme. The traffic at the starting point was much higher than Vertical's, and his royalties were more than 20 times mine. At that time, to be honest, it was quite a blow to me. But the only thing I could do was to persevere and share the world in my heart with the readers. Until recently, I've seen a lot of nasty posts. In the comments section of a certain channel, my family and I have been cursed to death countless times. Some time ago, there was even someone who came to Vertical's comment section to scold us. I feel that I can't stay silent anymore. I don't care about those who read pirated copies, but please don't scold me while reading pirated copies, and don't insult the author's family. There are also many readers who have spent money to read the original version. Regrettably, I have to say that apart from subscribing to Vertical and Horizontal, the author doesn't receive a single cent of the money you spend. So, if you're willing to support the author, it's better to come to Vertical and Horizontal or download Vertical and Horizontal's webpage. You can find the book there. Chapter 968. Everyone in the hall turned around and saw a young girl standing at the door. She wore a white dress that was like a light muslin. It was as if she was shrouded in smoke and mist. Other than her black hair, her entire body was snow white. Pucha Chiozao happened to turn her head and looked her in the eye. She couldn't help but be stunned. She only felt that this girl was elegant and elegant. Her expression was cold and indifferent, as pure as snow, and also as cold as snow. She really didn't know if she was happy or angry, sad or happy. And for a moment, she couldn't help but feel ashamed of herself. There was actually such a beautiful girl in the world. Song Qing recognized the other party's appearance, and his expression became extremely strange. It seemed that he and Xiao Long Nu were really fated to run into each other like this. It had been a while since they last met, but his sister-in-law was still as beautiful and refined as ever. Icy Snow was her senior sister, and Xiao Long Nu could be considered as his sister-in-law to a certain extent. However, now that he was disguised as Tang Quobian and had a full beard, it would be impossible for anyone to recognize him. Ouyang Feng looked at the young girl in astonishment. He also recognized Xiao Long Nu's identity. Back at the inn, he had witnessed Xiao Long Nu chasing after Yin Zhiping and Zhao Zhijing. She had displayed her invincible might and defeated a group of Mongolian grandmasters. He had a deep impression of her swordsmanship. Once he thought of her other identity, Ouyang Feng's mood became even more complicated. Ever since he regained consciousness on the Divine Dragon Island, he couldn't help but think of his father who had killed Ouyang Ku when he saw Yang Guo again. Therefore, he loved and hated Yang Guo, his adopted son. It was the same for Xiao Long Nu. On the one hand, he felt gratified to see his future daughter-in-law, so beautiful. On the other hand, he didn't want Yang Kang's son to have such a perfect lover. On the other hand, Taj Tish was deeply shocked. One must know that ever since she came to the Central Plains, she had always been an existence that could suppress all other beauties. Although she had never paid much attention to her appearance, she was extremely conceited about it. This was the first time she had encountered an opponent that was on par with her, especially when she sensed the frigid, immortal-like aura that was unknowingly emanating from the other party. Even she, as a woman, could not help but be moved. If these people could be said to be able to objectively appreciate Xiao Long Nu's beauty, Yin Zhiping's chest felt like it had been hit by a heavy hammer. He stared at her in a daze, unable to distinguish north from south. Song Qing noticed his abnormality and couldn't help but secretly shake his head. This Yin Zhiping could be considered a romantic. Unfortunately, he didn't have the life of the protagonist, but he got the protagonist's disease. How could he have a good ending? Since Miss Long has spoken, then I'll leave this stinky Taoist to you. Song Qing loosened his grip on Yin Zhiping, but he did not seal his opponent's acupoints. Whether Yin Zhiping wanted to fight back or accept his death, it was his own business. Xiao Long Nu looked at him in surprise. You know me? Her eyebrows were slightly furrowed, as if she was thinking about when she had seen this bearded man. Her expression was extremely cute. Song Qing was startled. So he had accidentally exposed himself just now. Just as he was thinking about how to explain, Xiao Long Nu no longer looked at him and directly turned to Yin Jiping. Do you want to commit suicide, or do you want me to do it? Song Qing couldn't help but smile bitterly. He was still thinking about how to explain, but the other party didn't care at all. Perhaps the only person she cared about in this world was Yanghua? Sigh. I wonder if she still remembers that brother-in-law who shared the same bed with her at that time. Thinking about that time in the inn when he held her delicate hand while being intimate with icy snow, Song Qing's heart skipped a beat. Yin Jiping stared blankly at Xiao Long Nu. He didn't expect the lover of his dreams to say such a heartless thing to him. Yin Jiping's heart tightened, and he was momentarily stunned on the spot, unable to speak. Seeing that he didn't answer, Xiao Long Nu's eyebrows furrowed. Since you don't want to commit suicide, then I'll do it. With that, she walked straight towards him. The people of Chongyang's sect looked at each other in dismay. They didn't know what kind of grudge their new headmaster had with Xiao Long Nu. Why did she want to kill him the moment they met? But seeing that Xiao Long Nu moved, Yin Jiping didn't have the slightest reaction. The Taoist priest between the two, in order to protect their new headmaster, hastily rushed forward and grabbed her left and right arms. Before their fingers could even touch Xiao Long Nu's sleeves, a cold light flashed before their eyes. They felt a sharp pain in their wrists and hastily leaped back. The two swords at their waists had been pulled out by Xiao Long Nu. In that instant, their wrists were hit by the swords. Half of their wrist bones were broken and blood was dripping down. Xiao Long Nu's attack was so fast that the bystanders couldn't see clearly how she snatched the swords. The two Taoist priests had already escaped with injuries. Everyone couldn't help but be stunned. Song Qing, Ouyang Feng, and Qiu Qianren were still fine. After all, they had seen Xiao Long Nu's moves at the inn. But Tajkis and Pucha Qiucao were extremely shocked. Today, Pucha Qiucao had met two women who were 100 times more beautiful than her and whose martial arts were far above hers. It could be said that she had suffered a heavy blow. Tajkis was also extremely afraid. She was the head of the 4 great guardian kings of the Ming dynasty and was a top expert in Jianghu. But just now, she didn't see how Xiao Long Nu made her move. If her sword had been aimed at her, would she have ended up like the two Taoist priests? But the ones that were most shocked were the Chuanjian Taoists. Previously, for Grandma's son and Yanghua, Xiao Long Nu wreaked havoc in Chongyang Palace. Many of the people present had seen her move. But at that time, although her martial arts were high, it wasn't as high as it was now. Another fat Taoist priest shouted, "Everyone attack together. We have the advantage in numbers. How can we be afraid of this little witch?" Wang Jitan and the other third-generation disciples heard this and frowned. After all, Chongyang Palace was a righteous sect. If they were to use numbers to bully a weak and delicate young girl, it would be a scandal. But they were also clear that no one could win in a one-on-one fight. So even though they were hesitant, no one said anything to stop them. The fat Taoist priest thought that no matter how strong Xiao Long Nu's martial arts were, she was still a young girl. If everyone attacked together, they would win. So he took the lead and thrust his sword at Xiao Long Nu, who knew that the tip of Xiao Long Nu's sword would tremble. His left wrist, left leg, and right leg were all struck. With a loud roar, he fell to the ground. These 4 strikes were even faster. Even Ouyang Feng's expression changed. His opponent's attacks seemed to be 3 times faster than last time at the inn. At this time, the rest of the Taoists couldn't hold back and rushed forward. They saw her white dress fluttering and the cold light flashing. Xiao Long Nu's 2 swords were like 2 silver snakes that slithered around the center of the main hall. Ding dang, Chong Lang, oh no, sounds rose and fell. In a moment, the long swords in the hands of the Chuanjian Taoists fell to the ground. Everyone's wrist was struck. The most amazing thing was that she was using the same stance, jade bracelet on white wrist. When the Taoists saw her sword flash past their eyes, they felt a sharp pain in their wrists. They were helpless and had no chance to fight back. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.